Chapter 843. They traveled day and night. Shui Tianmu and Elder Su had already seen through Long Chen's intentions. Their expressions were extremely solemn. Green Moon Valley was located 800,000 miles east of the Warring States Kingdom. It was surrounded by mountains on both sides. If there was a rainstorm, it would quickly form a turbulent river. The mountains on both sides were steep, and there were wolf packs and origin beasts wreaking havoc. At night, the wolf packs would stand on top of the mountain and emit a green light, turning the entire white moon into a green color. This was the origin of the name Green Moon Valley. This was the destination of Long Chen and the others. It was also the closest route for the Emperor of Humanity and the others to pass through the Warring States Kingdom. They traveled day and night. It took a full 20 days for Long Chen and the others to arrive. Long Chen said to Shui Tianmu and Elder Su, "First, set up the array according to my instructions. They have suffered a setback this time, so this will be their gate to hell." Elder Su and Shui Tianmu's backs were unconsciously covered in cold sweat. Even now, they were still trembling with fear. Although 2 of the 6 people including the Emperor of Humanity had died, there were still 4 of them left. These 4 people were all emperors, and some were even late-stage emperors or peak emperors. If they were not careful, all 3 of them would die here. "Long Chen, are you really going to do this? Regardless of the outcome of this battle, you will become the enemy of all the emperors." Elder Su could not help but ask. He wanted to tell Long Chen that it was not too late to regret. Long Chen shook his head and said, "It is imperative. You can leave after this battle." Long Chen knew that these people represented the Emperor's will. Even if they were the deity king's will, he had no choice but to become their enemy. The Emperor of Humanity already knew that he had the Primal Chaos Golden Codex, so he would not let him go. As for the others, their goal was also very obvious. They wanted to kill the Goddess Hua clan and take back the inheritance of the various corpse worlds. Long Chen could not sit idly by and do nothing. If it wasn't for Feng Shi of the Goddess Nuwa clan, all the corpse worlds would have turned into ashes long ago, and he and the others would have lost their lives long ago. Now that the Nuwa clan had severely injured the 6 imperial emperors, Long Chen was determined to kill all of them while retreating. Of the 6 monarchs, 2 were dead, 2 were severely injured, and 2 were left with only their divine souls. This kind of opportunity was hard to come by. The array that Long Chen taught everyone was very profound. It actually used 100,000 people to set up the array at the same time. Elder Su had always stayed in the Water Spirit Ancient Tomb and was very proficient in the Tao of array formations. But when he saw Long Chen's array formation, he was still confused. It took a total of 3 days for 100,000 people to set up the array formation. After the formation was set up, Long Chen said to the people under his feet, "In this battle, I want to kill the Emperor. After this battle, the 3 of us will crown 10 people each." Many of them had already discovered who Long Chen was going to attack. However, since they swore loyalty to Long Chen and the other 2, it was equivalent to handing over their lives. Unless an even more powerful Imperial Emperor erased the brand on their divine souls, they would not betray them. Of course, even without the brand, less than 20% of them would betray them. In the ancient sacred divine world, if a great emperor wanted to be crowned, they would have to exchange their lives for it. On the other side, the Emperor of Humanity and the other 3 great emperors led the 300,000 great emperors in a straight line toward Sengoku. Passing through Sengoku was the shortest way to return to their bases. They were not worried that Sengoku would attack them. In fact, they had even passed by the bases of other imperial emperors and venerable sovereigns along the way. The divine emperor beside the Emperor of Humanity was left with only his divine soul. His eyes were filled with fear as he hissed, "I never thought that the Nuwa clan would have no intention of negotiating. They actually turned against us directly. Nuwa clan's actions are equivalent to slapping the faces of all the venerable sovereigns. The next time we come, Nuwa clan will be annihilated. Let's not think too much about it. If Sovereign Zhang Kuang and the other great emperors attack us, will we be in danger? Sovereign Zhang Kuang doesn't have the guts. He doesn't have the courage of Nuwa clan. The great emperors discussed among themselves. The Emperor of Humanity was the only one who remained silent. He was also the one with the lightest injuries in this group. Ever since he sensed Longchen and Sengoku, he knew that Nuwa clan was no longer his main target. What he needed was the Primal Chaos Golden Codex. Every time he thought of the Primal Chaos Golden Codex, the Emperor of Humanity felt excited. However, he did not dare to show it. During this time, his main body, the human Tao Emperor, had not made any moves. He was afraid that anyone would see through his thoughts and suspect Longchen. The Primal Chaos Golden Codex was a cultivation technique that the Realm Lord had once cultivated. The journey lasted for another 3 days. The great emperors seemed to be very tired. They had just arrived at Nuwa clan and were attacked by venerable sovereigns before they could even speak. If they had not used all of their secret techniques, many more people would have died by now. The remaining 300,000 great emperors behind them all looked like frosted eggplants. They could not be blamed. Anyone who had seen the great emperors in action that day was probably the same. In 3 moves, 2 great emperors' souls were destroyed. 4 others were severely injured. 2 more had their bodies destroyed. Almost half of the great emperors who followed them were killed. 300,000 people. 300,000 of them were turned into powder in 3 moves. Whether it was the Emperor of Humanity or the great emperors who followed them, they all looked at Nuwa clan in a new light. There was no room for negotiation. The courage of the venerable sovereigns to shed all pretense of cordiality shocked them. Sengoku was not far from that valley. The great emperor looked into the distance and said. Behind him, another young imperial emperor, who was only left with his divine soul, smiled and said, "The venerable sovereigns are really going to attack the goddess Wa clan. If they can destroy the Warring States clan as well, that Jean Lanua is quite pretty, she's an emperor now. Although she's a little hot-tempered, she's quite pretty. However, her uncle is a venerable sovereign." Blue Moon Valley. The entire valley did not seem to have changed at all. However, if one were to patrol the edges of the valley, one would find that there was a formation core every 100 miles. The mountains on both sides were as steep as blades. Longchen stood at the highest point. He gazed into the distance, and a cold smile suddenly appeared on his face. Today was the day he started his massacre. Whether it was Elder Su or Shui Tianmu, their hearts were beating fast. The 300,000 people hiding in the mountains on both sides held their breaths. Rumble. Piles of rocks rolled in the valley. Then, a large group of people gradually entered the valley. Chapter 844. The mighty team surged into the valley. There were even origin beasts howling from the steep mountain peaks on both sides. The emperors were not vigilant at all. The emperors behind them were even more exhausted and listless. They could not be blamed for this. This was the path they had taken to come here. The various factions were avoiding them. What was there to worry about? They could not think of any faction that was willing to get involved in the Goddess Wa clan's mess at this time. The Emperor of Humanity and the others advanced for nearly 6 hours and were already deep into the valley. The Emperor of Humanity suddenly stood up. He frowned and looked around. When the other 3 emperors saw this, they asked in confusion, "What's going on? Is there a problem?" The Emperor of Humanity said in a deep voice, "We've advanced for 6 hours between 2 huge mountain peaks, but not a single demonic beast rushed down. There are only beast cries." The imperial emperors frowned slightly. Immediately, they spread their divine consciousness in all directions. Their divine consciousness swept through the entire valley like a hurricane and climbed up the mountain peak. However, they did not find anything. When they were about to withdraw their divine consciousness, they suddenly discovered a figure standing on the steep mountain peak. Formation, refine the heavens. This person was Longchen. Longchen's lips curled into a cold smile as his gaze landed on the human Tao Emperor. As he shouted, a dim light rushed out from his hand and finally stopped above the center of the valley. The Emperor of Humanity was stunned when Longchen's figure appeared. He did not expect Longchen to appear in this place. In the next moment, the Emperor of Humanity was about to soar into the sky and take Longchen down in front of everyone. Swish! 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 Just as he leaped up, countless light pillars shot into the sky from all directions. Each light pillar was close to 10 meters thick and covered the entire sky in the blink of an eye. A mighty force immediately rose and fell, and there was a dim light in the center of these light pillars. This dim light was only the size of a fingernail, but a cauldron shape appeared in all directions. Poochie! Poochie! The Emperor of Humanity had just rushed out 1,000 meters when a dim light swept down from the cauldron, directly covering him. The Emperor of Humanity felt as if he was being pressed down by a mountain. He fell down heavily and was blasted into the dust. Hiss! At this instant, the other 3 imperial monarchs gasped while their expressions changed drastically. Among the 4 of them, the Emperor of Humanity was the least injured. Now that even he had been suppressed, they naturally felt a little more wary in their hearts. Who are you? Do you know who we are? The Divine Force Sovereign Emperor's divine soul's pressure was overwhelming, and the cultivation of a perfected Sovereign Emperor swept out without restraint. Wang! Longchen raised his right hand to the sky, and a complex Tao pattern rapidly condensed on his fingertip. Then, it landed on the giant cauldron formed by the dim light in the center. He said indifferently, "I don't want to know your identity, but today is your burial day." As Longchen's voice faded away, the inscription had already fallen into the giant cauldron. The giant cauldron immediately emitted a clanging sound, as if the great Tao was trembling, and the Tao runes were creeping. The dim light scattered and directly covered the Emperor of Humanity and the other 3. Who is this person? What's with that giant cauldron? It can actually sweep down the Emperor of Humanity. What kind of formation is this? Can this formation suppress an imperial monarch? How is this possible? What is he doing? What grudge does this person have with the imperial monarchs? Why is he an imperial monarch under the arch? Sounds of panic and shock came from the 300,000 imperial realm cultivators behind the Emperor of Humanity and the others. 300,000 imperial realm cultivators were densely packed, and the small sounds were like a surging torrent. Some people had already begun to bombard the formation. Hundreds of thousands of imperial realm cultivators attacked, and the scene was breathtaking. Kill! Seeing this, Longchen's eyes were filled with killing intent. With a roar, countless people attacked from the peak from all directions. Elders Su and Shui Tianmu were both imperial monarchs, and each attack could take away 100 imperial realm cultivators. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere, and screams shook the sky. Broken arms and legs, and souls flew everywhere. Azure, a dancing elephant. At the same time, Longchen waved his hand, and an Azure totem fell into the valley. Wherever the totem covered, everyone's attacks slowed down. The chains of the Azure totem began to loosen, and endless blood seemed to flow in reverse. Roar! In an instant, the entire Azure totem seemed to come alive, and it was inexplicably terrifying. At this moment, both sides seemed to be in a killing frenzy. Although the 300,000 people led by Longchen and the other 2 occupied the high ground, there were still people who gradually rushed up the mountain. The chaotic battle had already begun. However, the outcome of this battle could not be clearer. The Emperor of Humanity and the others were suppressed by the World Suppression Cauldron's formation, while Shui Tianmu and Elder Su were both imperial monarchs. The Emperor of Humanity and the others were covered by the dim light. Seeing that everything was blood-red, they were all stunned. In just a moment, they began to bombard the dim light. They were shocked to find that the dim light was indestructible. Even when the 4 of them attacked together, they could only make it flicker continuously. As the light flickered, there were even Taoist rhymes circulating on it. It was extremely terrifying. No, there's something wrong with this dim light. My soul. No, no! The Divine Strength Emperor looked at his soul as if he had discovered something extremely terrifying. Among the 4 imperial monarchs, 2 of them who had lost their physical bodies were shocked to find that their souls were withering at a speed visible to the naked eye. The Emperor of Humanity and the other person's eyes were filled with shock. They hurriedly stopped their attacks and distanced themselves from the two imperial monarchs. After 100 breaths, the two imperial monarchs who had lost their physical bodies completely disappeared without a trace, as if they had never existed. Who are you? How do you know such a terrifying formation? This formation can actually kill our souls. The other imperial monarch exclaimed in shock as he stared at Long Chen. On the other hand, the Emperor of Humanity's expression was gloomy, but he did not say anything. He only looked at Long Chen in a daze. The dim light did not weaken after the two imperial monarchs' souls were killed. Instead, it became even denser. Taoist rhymes circulated on it, as if it was reflecting the light of the huge cauldron above. The imperial monarchs did not even bother to look outside. They did not care about the lives of the imperial realm cultivators outside. Long Chen knew that these imperial realm cultivators were just sacrificial lambs. However, as long as the Emperor of Humanity and the others did not give the order, they would not surrender. Otherwise, only death would await them. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, there were 300,000 people. No one could even feel the passage of time. They only knew that they were crazily activating the power in their bodies. When the scene calmed down, everyone was covered in blood. The blood in the entire valley had turned into a river that flowed rapidly. Pfft. Chapter 845. The Emperor's remnant soul once said that the visualization technique he taught Long Chen contained boundless power. It was a virtual god totem. As the chains on it slowly unraveled, its power would gradually manifest. In the end, it could even command an Asura for its own use. Long Chen didn't make a move from the beginning to the end. All his power was used to suppress the two People Tao Emperors. The dim light and the world suppression cauldron fragment were controlled by him. Nearly 400,000 people died in the valley. Long Chen and the others also lost nearly 100,000 people. Looking at the purgatory phenomenon, the Emperor of Humanity suddenly said, "What do you plan to do next? So what if we killed 2 emperors and 300,000 emperors? Our physical bodies are still here. Although our cultivation isn't at its peak, once this formation is broken, it'll be easy to kill the 3 of you." Shui Tianmu and Elder Su's expressions were as dark as water. Just as the human Tao Emperor had said, the 2 of them had extremely high cultivations. The formation alone had trapped them, but once they broke free, the situation would immediately reverse. 2 late-stage emperors were unimaginably terrifying. But today, they had to die no matter what. Otherwise, the water beast god race and the water spirit ancient tomb would be implicated. Long Chen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. The origin energy around him seemed to have dissipated. As soon as the human Tao Emperor finished speaking, he suddenly laughed and said, "Since I've done it today, do you think you can still live?" After that, countless ghosts were crawling on the 2 surrounding mountain peaks. Then, they leaped into the bloody waters of the valley. The wailing of ghosts made the emperors around feel uncomfortable. Their faces turned pale and they all paled in shock. These are ghosts formed when the souls of 400,000 people dissipated. You can even do this. The Emperor of Humanity stared at Long Chen. The other Emperor of Humanity couldn't help but tremble when he saw this. He madly urged his cultivation to attack the dim light, trying to break the formation. But the dim light didn't tremble at all. The Emperor of Humanity suddenly laughed loudly and said, "If the 4 of us didn't do anything when we entered this place, we might have already gotten out. Now that the formation is based on the souls of those 2 guys, it can trap us for at least a dozen days." 400,000 ghosts rushed toward the 2 of them along the blood water. Even Shui Tianmu and the others couldn't help but shudder at the scene. The Emperor of Humanity narrowed his eyes and stared at Long Chen. He said calmly, "You've really given me a big surprise. It seems like what you've obtained is far beyond my imagination." Very good. When he reached the Celestial Emperor, he didn't seem to want to resist at all. There wasn't the slightest hint of worry in his eyes. Shui Tianmu and the others didn't know what the human Tao Emperor was implying, but Long Chen did. The human Tao Emperor originally thought that he only had the primal chaos golden codex. Now that he had killed 4 heavily injured emperors and 300,000 emperors, it was enough to see that he had other inheritances. Longchen stared at the Emperor of Humanity and said coldly, "There will be an end to our enmity one day." As his voice fell, nearly 400,000 ghosts rushed into the dim light formation, completely annihilating the Emperor of Humanity and the other person. The dim light could suppress souls and restrain emperors, but it didn't have any effect on the ghosts. Rumble. Within the dim light, a vast power poured out crazily. The entire ground was collapsing rapidly, but the dark light followed closely behind, finally stopping 100 meters below the ground. At this moment, even the ground beneath their feet was covered by the dim light. Countless ghosts seemed to be attracted and rushed down crazily, instantly filling the collapsed abyss. Divine light soared into the sky. It took a full day for it to calm down. A ray of light swept through the sky. It wasn't a god, but a thought. This was the thought that the Emperor of Humanity left in the clone of the Emperor of Humanity. "Stop right there." With a wave of Longchen's hand, the power of his spiritual energy poured out. The Dragon Palace buzzed, suppressing this wisp of thought. Northfoot territory, at the border between the Divine Crow Sea and the Divine Volcano. The human Tao Emperor had been slaughtering his way through an army of 10,000, but suddenly froze in place. An Emperor of Humanity's sword pierced through the right side of his chest. After being stunned for a short while, he flew through the air, ignoring the people behind him. Images flashed past the human Emperor of Humanity's eyes. It was Longchen slaughtering the Emperor of Humanity with the formation. These images came to an abrupt end after a while. The human Emperor of Humanity's face was as cold as ice. He muttered to himself, "This guy actually destroyed my clone. Retreat, give these 3 secret realms to the Divine Fire Emperor." The human Emperor of Humanity's sudden retreat caused the people of the Divine Crow Sea and the emperors to look at each other. One of the emperors who was bathed in blood asked the human Emperor of Humanity, "These 3 secret realms are rich in resources. If we retreat now, our losses will be too great." The human Emperor of Humanity's voice was cold. "Resources? I only want these resources. Compared to what I'm about to do, all of this is nothing." Green Moon Valley. Blood energy filled the sky and ghosts whimpered. When Longchen, Shui Tianmu, and the other 2 brought the remaining 200,000 people away, everyone was silent. This massacre didn't just take the lives of several 100,000 people, it also made them feel as if their hearts were being tightly gripped by a hand. Guilt? Fear? Or something else? In this massacre, their hands were stained with too much blood. The rivers of blood, the mountains of corpses, and the sea of blood made everyone's eyes turn scarlet. Longchen walked in front of everyone and said, "You guys take the emperors behind you and leave. I'll walk the rest of the way by myself." Shui Tianmu and Elder Su were enlightened and agreed. Looking at the 2 of them, Longchen shook his head. "Today's massacre is also a kind of training. Today, you will control the life and death of 100,000 emperors for the emperors. In the future, as emperors, how many lives will you control and how much blood will you see? If blood can blind your minds, then what's the point of talking about emperors and divine kings? The Grand Tao is even more laughable." Longchen's voice wasn't soft and it reached everyone's ears. Everyone was stunned on the spot. Wasn't the reason why they risked their lives for the title of emperor? After Longchen finished speaking, the Emperor of Humanity's remnant soul's voice sounded in his mind. This voice was like the rumbling of the Grand Tao. He couldn't help but recite it. The Grand Tao is ethereal and full of vicissitudes. The end of reincarnation, the pink skeleton. See the world's unparalleled blood, build an everlasting legacy. Longchen's simple words made Shui Tianmu and the others pale. Everyone stared at Longchen in a daze. Chapter 846. The Sovereign Lord's voice disappeared from Longchen's mind. Along with it, the haze in everyone's heart and the scarlet in their eyes disappeared. Shui Tianmu and Elder Su left with the remaining great emperors behind them. Longchen still had 60,000 great emperors with him. Longchen had already made a decision in his heart as he led these 60,000 people. He split them into groups of 10 and sent them to Goddess Was clan. He himself also set foot on the path to Goddess Was clan. Green Moon Valley. In just a few days, dozens of people from different forces arrived at this place. Many couldn't help but tremble when they saw the ghosts and blood flowing like a river. The various forces quickly guessed what had happened here, but no one knew who had done it. For a time, everyone was in danger. The shocking news spread like wildfire throughout the Northfoot territory and even the neighboring territories controlled by several divine kings. The 6 great emperors had sent envoys to Goddess Was clan and 600,000 great emperors. The entire Northfoot territory was in turmoil. Sengoku, who was closest to Green Moon Valley, was the first to clarify. In fact, even if they didn't clarify, no one would think of Sengoku as the culprit. The 6 great emperors of the Northfoot territory had all died. No matter who did it, they were on the same side as Goddess Was clan. And this was no different from becoming enemies with the 6 great emperors. Since then, the name Green Moon Valley had completely disappeared. It was now known as Ghost Moon Valley. Because the blood chi here had not dissipated, ghosts wreaked havoc, and the night was like a blood moon. Various forces began to investigate, but the forces in the Northfoot territory that were strong enough to kill 4 great emperors and slaughter 300,000 great emperors didn't make any moves. Ghost Moon Valley became an unsolved case, a matter that made everyone pale when they talked about it. The death of several 100,000 great emperors might not be a big deal in the ancient sacred god realm. However, killing 300,000 people in a small Ghost Moon Valley and killing 4 monarchs was enough to shock everyone. In the following month, almost all forces began to recruit great emperors. There were even rumors that key figures of many forces had begun to move. At this moment, Longchen, the culprit, had already arrived at Goddess Was clan. In this one month, Longchen also heard another piece of news that made him extremely alarmed. That was the Imperial Academy. Nowadays, the rankings of the Imperial Academy of Arts, as well as many strange people and strange things, had unknowingly spread throughout the various large territories. There was also a distribution of the strength of each realm's Emperor realm and even Divine King. There was even a ranking specially created, named the Northern Foot Realm's Emperor Ranking, or the 9 Treasures Realm's Emperor Ranking. There were even rumors on the streets that these rankings were ordered by the Ethereal King, the 9 Treasures Divine King, and other people who controlled a realm. In the city closest to the northwest of the Nuwa Divine Clan, Longchen was sitting in a restaurant. In front of him was a weak scholar who was talking non-stop. When he heard what he said, Longchen could not help but laugh. This person was Shu San. If he hadn't heard from Shu San how they dealt with God King level powerhouses, Longchen wouldn't have thought of it. Every single God King's private life had been thoroughly investigated by them. It was to the extent that they practically followed the God Kings around day and night. Shu San had already drunk 3 large pots of water. If he hadn't seen Longchen ordering a few side dishes, the restaurant owner would have probably chased him away. During this period, almost 99% of the people in the Imperial Academy of Arts have left the Northern Foot Realm and the 9 Treasures Realm. Next is the 4 Seas Realm, the 9 Continents Realm, and the Spirit Mountain Realm. Shu San finally showed signs of stopping. The 9 Continents Spirit Mountain was originally a realm, but another Divine King was born and divided it up. TSK. Longchen smiled bitterly and shook his head. It seemed that the Northern Foot Realm and the 9 Treasures Realm would be full of rankings in the coming days. The 4 Seas Realm and the upper echelons of the 9 Continents Spirit Mountain would probably not have peace. Today, Longchen's understanding of the Imperial Academy of Arts had really reached another level. Sooner or later, the Imperial Academy of Arts would probably sweep through the entire ancient sacred divine world. Today, I called you here because I have something to ask. I want to know the whereabouts of the Emperor Lord's broken weapon and the Emperor Lord's body. Longchen finally interrupted and asked. Shu San frowned and said solemnly, "What do you want these things for? With your current level, if you want to attack these things, you probably won't even know how you died. He didn't have any sarcasm in his words. Instead, he was worried. Long Chen naturally knew how powerful it was, but it was just as the Emperor Lord's broken soul said. If he relied on his own cultivation, not to mention becoming a sector lord in a few hundred years, even becoming a divine king would be out of his luck. A sector lord would need hundreds of thousands of years of accumulation. This was a terrifying number. Long Chen continued to ask, "Then tell me some of the things I have a chance to obtain. The rest can wait until I have the power to tell you." Shu San saw Long Chen's insistence and nodded. He pondered for a moment and said, "No one knows how many parts the Emperor Lord's body has been split into, but with your Imperial Emperor cultivation, you can only come into contact with 3 parts in the Northern Foot territory. Moreover, these 3 parts haven't been refined yet. Relatively speaking, your chances of obtaining them are much higher." Long Chen was startled. He frowned and asked solemnly, "How many people have refined the Emperor Lord's body? How many people do you know have successfully refined it?" "I don't know about those outside the Northern Foot territory, but there are at least 2 people in the Northern Foot territory who have successfully refined it. Moreover, both of them are Emperor Realm cultivators." Shu San didn't mention who those 2 people were. In his opinion, Long Chen's current cultivation level was equivalent to suicide if he fought with an Emperor Realm cultivator. You should be glad that the ethereal king of the Northern Foot territory isn't interested in the Emperor Lord's body. Otherwise, you would have no hope. Long Chen nodded. This was the truth. If a divine king wanted to obtain the Emperor Lord's body, they could at least obtain a part of it. This was good news for Long Chen. "Then give me the information of the 3 people I can come into contact with." Long Chen replied. Shu San didn't hesitate. He quickly imprinted a jade slip with his right hand and handed it to Long Chen. Long Chen took the jade slip and immersed his divine sense into it. Shu San shook his head and said, "Since my palace master has recognized you as a friend, you can come to my Imperial Emperor Palace if your life is in danger. We don't know how to fight, but if we want to live, no one can stop us." After Shu San finished speaking, he didn't intend to stay any longer. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared on the spot. Long Chen was surprised by his speed. Chapter 847. Looking at the jade slip in his hand, Long Chen had already memorized the information of the 3 people in it. All 3 of them were in the North Foot territory and were Imperial Emperors. One of them was a mid-stage Imperial Emperor, while the other 2 were late-stage Imperial Emperors. The 3 of them had obtained a part of the Imperial Emperor's body by chance, but they were unable to figure out how to refine it due to their low cultivation. Long Chen stood up and walked toward Nuwa celestial race. The voice of the Monarch Lord's fragmented soul sounded again. "My organs contained almost 50% of my mortal body's origin energy, but unfortunately, they were all turned into corpses and destroyed. Now, you can only look for other bodies. As for the missing parts, I have my ways once your cultivation has increased." Long Chen nodded. In truth, the Imperial Emperor's remnant soul's words were also a question in his heart. After the Imperial Emperor died, his body was scattered throughout the ancient sacred divine world. Everyone who obtained it had their own fortuitous encounters. For example, the human Dao emperors had all relied on their own guesses to obtain the fortunes within. However, no matter what, the Imperial Emperor's corpse's origin energy was definitely incomplete. It might even have lost a large portion of it. Long Chen shook his head hard and stopped thinking about it. Now that things had come to this, he could only take one step at a time. The path that the Imperial Emperor's remnant soul had pointed out was still a shortcut for him to advance. The goddess Hua clan was like a celestial mountain. The mountain was covered in emerald green and surrounded by divine rainbows. However, outside the mountain, there were people constantly patrolling. There were even Imperial Emperors streaking across the sky from time to time. Long Chen admired the Imperial Emperor of the goddess Hua clan, Feng Shi. He had never seen such a magnanimous person in his life. If Feng Shi hadn't built the Eternal Origin Mountain and the Underground Palace to send them out of the corpse world, they wouldn't have been able to see the ancient sacred divine world's current state. A month ago, Imperial Emperor Feng Shi had killed 2 Imperial Emperors in 3 moves and killed 300,000 Great Emperors. Who would have thought that the Imperial Emperor would have such a murderous side to him? Longchen arrived at the foot of the Goddess Hua clan's mountain while he was thinking. A few patrolling guards immediately noticed Longchen. Every one of them had a solemn expression. Longchen could understand why Goddess Hua's clan was treading on thin ice. After all, they were now facing 6 venerable sovereigns. "Who are you? What's the matter?" The patrolman was very vigilant. Longchen didn't continue walking forward. He stood in place and bowed politely. "I'm here to look for Monarch Feng Shi. Please tell him that an old friend from 10 Directions Heaven is here." As Longchen spoke, he released a little bit of his Imperial Emperor cultivation. The expressions of the few patrolmen suddenly changed, and their expressions became a bit more respectful. Although he didn't know where the 10 Directions celestial domain was, he still nodded and said, "Please wait for a moment, Your Majesty. I will go and pass down the order now." An Imperial Emperor was an awe-inspiring existence no matter where he went. Longchen nodded politely. The patrolman walked towards the mountain gate. After a while, he came out and respectfully said, "Your Excellency, please follow me into the mountain. The ancestor will be waiting for you in the clan's main hall." Entering the mountain gate, he stepped onto the green stones and walked all the way up the mountain. The cries of birds, beasts, and insects could be heard all around. There were even red-crowned cranes soaring in the sky. It was like an otherworldly paradise. After turning 9 times on the green stone path and seeing 9 palaces, Longchen finally stopped. Halfway up the mountain, Feng Shi's calm face appeared in front of Longchen's eyes. "Brother Longchen, I haven't seen you for many years. Seeing you today really makes me have a whole new level of respect for you." Feng Shi took a few steps forward and politely invited Longchen into the main hall. Feng Shi, as a venerable emperor, could be so magnanimous. When he called him brother, Longchen's heart warmed a little. Although Feng Shi himself was from the ancient sacred divine world, he and Longchen had met in the corpse world. This kind of familiarity made Longchen feel very close. In just over 2 years, Longchen had stepped into the Imperial Emperor realm from the Great Emperor realm. Even Feng Shi was shocked beyond words. The two drank wine in the hall and listened to Longchen talk about his travels in the Remnant Land and the Warring States period in the past 2 years. Feng Shi raised his cup several times, only to let out a long sigh. He said with a compassionate expression, "The ancient sacred divine world has been in turmoil ever since the death of the Great Emperor. The Great Emperor realm and the Great Emperor realm have become the greatest number of sacrifices." Longchen also heard Feng Shi's helplessness. It turned out that he had wanted to discuss with the Emperor of Humanity and the others to try to avoid war. However, when he learned that the Emperor of Humanity and the others had entered the Nuar realm and slaughtered 2 cities to demonstrate their power, he had no intention of backing down. In his anger, he had almost killed the Emperor of Humanity and the others. After that, his anger dissipated, but he felt that he had been too reckless. Unfortunately, things had already come to this. "Brother Longchen, I will gather all my old friends tomorrow. After we have a gathering, you should leave. It would be best if you could persuade them to come with you," Feng Shi said with a somewhat guilty expression. Longchen didn't answer. He naturally knew what Feng Shi was thinking. Feng Shi didn't want to get rid of them, but at this moment, the Nuwa clan had become the target of public criticism. Once the great emperors came, they would have a chance of survival if they left the Nuwa clan. The sky gradually darkened. Feng Shi arranged a place for Longchen to stay. Longchen secretly decided that as long as there was a chance, he would protect the Nuwa clan. However, this wasn't easy. According to what he knew, the Realm Master's internal organs were all in the North Foot realm for some reason. His internal organs had turned into 11 corpse realms. However, all the inheritors of these 11 corpse realms were in the Nuwa clan. In other words, the Nuwa clan's true enemy was far from the 6 great emperors, but a total of 11. The next day, the people of the various corpse realms came with Feng Shi to meet with Longchen. What surprised Longchen was that these people's cultivation had stagnated. The strongest among them was only a mid-stage great emperor. When Longchen said that he would take them away and arrange for them to stay in the Imperial Academy, they shook their heads. These people shook their heads, sighed, and decided to leave the Goddess Wa clan. Just as Longchen and Jian Zhisan had said before leaving, these people had chosen to stay and couldn't make any progress in their cultivation. During this time in the Nuwa clan, not only did their state of mind not change, but they had also completely lost the will to continue cultivating. The crowd dispersed. Feng Shi said, "Since they have chosen to stay in the Nuwa clan, I will protect them until the last moment." Longchen's heart was heavy. After a moment of silence, he said, "I have several tens of thousands of great emperors. I want them to stay in the Nuwa clan for the time being. I will leave once I'm done." Feng Shi didn't refuse. He knew that Longchen didn't want to leave the Nuwa clan. Over the next 10 days, Longchen crowned 10 people in a row. Chapter 848. In the North Foot territory, there was a dangerous place called the White Bone Forbidden Zone. Even with Longchen's Imperial Lord cultivation base, it took him half a month to rush over from the Goddess Ziwa clan. According to Shu San's Jade Slip, the person with the Realm Lord's body was hiding here. In truth, it wasn't that Longchen hadn't thought of having Feng Shi lend him a helping hand. After all, it was much easier for an emperor to snatch things from these imperial emperors. However, this idea was rejected by Longchen as soon as it appeared. Feng Shi was now responsible for the safety of the entire Goddess Wa clan. It was impossible for him to leave the Goddess Wa clan. The various emperors were all very powerful. They were still observing each other and hadn't made a move yet. However, no one knew what they were planning. On the other hand, the less people who knew about the Imperial Emperor's body, the safer it would be. Longchen didn't know that the reason the emperors hadn't sent out their troops was because he had killed 4 Imperial Emperors and 300,000 Emperor Realm cultivators in Azure Cloud Valley. It was truly inconceivable that such a force would be killed in the Green Moon Valley. Especially when 4 Imperial Emperors had died. Furthermore, Emperor Feng Shi had a tough attitude. They even guessed that there were other emperors behind the Goddess Wa clan. Outside the White Bone Forbidden Zone, Longchen hid his cultivation and suppressed it to the late-stage Emperor realm to avoid attracting too much attention. He had been wandering outside the White Bone Forbidden Zone for the past few days to understand what kind of place it was. According to his investigation, there were 3 White Bone Forbidden Zone. Although the outermost area was dangerous, mid-stage and late-stage Emperor realm cultivators had a higher chance of survival if they were careful. The middle area was called the White Bone Palace. It was said that anyone who entered this place and hadn't reached the Imperial Emperor realm had only a 50% chance of survival. The third area was the center of the White Bone Forbidden Zone, the White Bone Abyss. Almost no one came out of the White Bone Abyss after entering. Even Imperial Emperors were no exception. It was said that an Emperor realm cultivator had entered this place and never returned. Longchen guessed that the Immeasurable Emperor was most likely near the White Bone Abyss. Of course, he couldn't rule out the possibility that he had been wandering around the White Bone Palace. These days, Longchen had also noticed it. There were many experts hiding outside the Forbidden Bone Forbidden Zone. Their target was most likely the Immeasurable Emperor, who had been forced into the Forbidden Bone Forbidden Zone. Many people knew that the Immeasurable Emperor possessed a great treasure. It was precisely because of this that he attracted a fatal disaster. He was chased here and hid in the White Bone Forbidden area. According to Shu San, very few people knew that this treasure was part of the Emperor's body. Even the Imperial Academy had only discovered his tracks when they were investigating the Forbidden White Bone grounds and had recorded his whereabouts in their records. Longchen, we plan to enter the Palace of Bones today. Don't be late. As Longchen was thinking, a bearded man called out to him. Longxing was Longchen's alias. The bearded man was a famous mercenary in the Forbidden Land of Bones. He was also one of the few mercenary groups that could enter the Palace of Bones. The Forbidden Land of Bones was very strange. Hundreds or even thousands of people died there every day. There were also many rules that had to be followed. Otherwise, it was not impossible for even monarch experts to die in the Palace of Bones. This was also one of the reasons why Longchen joined the mercenary group. After putting the money on the table, Longchen walked towards the edge of the Forbidden Land of Bones. It was almost noon. There was at least one mercenary group outside the Forbidden Land of Bones that was preparing to enter. Of course, there were no less than 1,000 people who had the intention of entering the Forbidden Land of Bones. Some of these people were traveling alone, and they wanted to enter to try their luck. There were also some that had formed a group to gain experience, and it was for the sake of improving their combat strength and obtaining some valuable divine medicines. However, these people were often the ones who died the most. These people were generally called calves by the mercenary groups. It's noon. Prepare to set off. Everyone, prepare for battle. Look clearly at our mission target this time. Remember the activity area. Every group, after a short briefing, the mercenary groups took advantage of the scorching sun to enter the Forbidden Land of Bones. This was one of the rules of the Forbidden Land of Bones. Entering the Forbidden Land of Bones at noon was the safest time to enter. On the other hand, there was another rule that could not be violated. That was that no one could enter the Forbidden Land of Bones after sunset. If they were trapped in the Forbidden Land of Bones as a last resort, they had to find the white bone divine statue. Otherwise, even monarchs would only leave behind a pile of bones after the night dispersed. Longchen followed behind the mercenary group and entered the Forbidden Land of Bones. As soon as he entered the Forbidden Land of Bones, Longchen felt the surrounding temperature suddenly drop. The entire Forbidden Land of Bones was in a dense forest area. Soon, Longchen understood why they had to enter the Forbidden Land of Bones at noon. They had only walked 1,000 meters, but the giant trees in all directions were constantly breathing in miasma. The miasma almost covered their path. It would be fine if they were late-stage monarch. However, if they were only early-stage or mid-stage monarch, even if they spread out their soul, they would most likely be lost in the miasma. Longxing, your cultivation is not bad. If you encounter danger in the White Bone Palace, do not leave yourself behind. Otherwise, you will be doomed eternally. The bearded man instructed Longchen. Longchen agreed, and the bearded man handed him a jade slip. This was the mercenary group's mission to enter the Forbidden Land. They accepted the mission to collect divine herbs. Entering the Forbidden Land of Bones once not only allowed them to obtain divine herbs, but also a handsome reward. Although this kind of mercenary work was risky, it was many times better than the people in the abandoned land. Most of the employers of these mercenary groups were large clans or forces with monarchs. If the opportunity came, they might have a chance to serve under a monarch and obtain the opportunity to be crowned. Ka. The group's walking speed was not fast. They had only walked less than 3,000 meters. However, a burst of crisp symphonic sounds forced them to stop in their tracks. White Bone Passage, silence. As the voice fell, the group of dozens of people stopped in their tracks. They didn't even make a sound of breathing. Longchen focused his gaze and looked forward from the right. He saw a group of 1-meter-tall dwarf skeletons crawling out from the ground. Then, they lined up and moved slowly from the east to the west. These skeletons were less than 30 meters away from Longchen's group. In this dense forest full of miasma and densing qi, seeing such a strange scene made one's hair stand on end. The skeletons gradually disappeared from Longchen's sight. Only then did the mercenary group move again. Chapter 849. As soon as he finished speaking, screams of agony had already reached Longchen's ears. The screams only lasted for 3 or 4 breaths before stopping abruptly. Then, the crisp sound of bones cracking gradually faded into the distance. The bearded man turned around and grinned. These people underestimate the Forbidden White Bone District too much. They think that they can do whatever they want in the first district. In the Forbidden White Bone District, many rules apply in any district. If you encounter these white bones, as long as you don't disturb them, you won't be in any danger. Long Chen nodded. In his heart, he also paid more attention to this white bone forbidden area. This place was so strange that it was a little ridiculous. He didn't even feel the slightest bit of power from the white bone dwarfs just now. But these white bones could easily kill mid- and late-stage Emperor Realm experts. The field of vision here is slightly wider. You have 300 breaths of time to find the spirit medicine. You have to return here regardless of whether you find it or not. The leading mercenary ordered. Everyone dispersed. Long Chen, the bearded man, and another white-faced swordsman formed a team. Although the field of vision here was slightly wider, in reality, as long as they walked more than 10 meters, they would still lose track of the others. Long Chen and the bearded man walked forward, leaving marks on the trees behind them. Under the 7th tree on the left, there is a bone medicine. Long Chen and the white-faced swordsman heard and moved closer to the bearded man. The white-faced swordsman narrowed his eyes and said, "Our luck is not bad. We can actually find a bone medicine here." Long Chen also looked over and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. The shape of this herb was almost the same as an ordinary divine medicine, but the color was as different as heaven and earth. The stem, branches, and leaves were all white. This white color was exactly the same as the white bone at the bottom of the root, as if it was an irregular bone spur standing on top of it. Be careful, there are bone soldiers near most ancient herbs. The bearded man and Long Chen followed closely behind and warned. The white-faced swordsman had already unsheathed his sword. Although his tone was relaxed, he didn't have the slightest intention of relaxing. He was clearly a veteran mercenary group. Ka. As expected, just as the white-faced swordsman approached, a bone path suddenly cut out from the ground. The pale-faced swordsman's expression suddenly changed. His long sword instantly flowed with brilliance, and he slashed out dozens of times to meet the white bone long saber. Crack. The white-faced swordsman's attack was like a piece of paper, directly cut through by the white bone saber. When the bearded man saw this, the giant hammer in his right hand smashed down with a loud bang. The power of a level 7 martial emperor was fully displayed. The giant trees in all directions were instantly reduced to dust. However, the bone blade and the bone medicine did not move at all. Long Chen frowned. A ray of light flashed from his hands. He didn't choose to attack. Instead, he swept the two of them away. Whoosh! Dripping with blood, a bone knife scraped past the white-faced swordsman's right leg. His entire right leg was like tofu under this bone knife. The two of them were thrown dozens of meters behind Long Chen. His right hand grabbed the giant hammer that fell to the ground. The bearded man carried the white-faced swordsman, who was still recovering his body, and shouted to Long Chen, "Long Xing, hurry up and run. This bone soldier's strength is not ordinary. I'm afraid it's at the level of an ancient general." Roar! The bone soldier's white mouth opened. It actually emitted a beast-like roar. The lower half of the bone soldier's body was about to burst out from the ground. Long Chen's figure suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already standing behind the bone soldier. The bone soldier's bone saber suddenly rolled backwards. Its wrist bone had turned 360 degrees. Boom. However, its legs were still on the ground. Long Chen's hammer flashed as it smashed down 3 times. The third hammer directly smashed the bone soldier's head into pieces. When the giant hammer was lifted, the bone soldier actually turned into a sky full of bone fragments that scattered on the ground. Then, it completely disappeared without a trace. Long Chen was even more surprised by this place. If the bone soldier hadn't appeared in front of him, he wouldn't have been able to detect it. The bone saber was also very strange. It actually ignored the late-stage Emperor Realm attack. If this weapon didn't turn into powder when it left the bone soldier, it would definitely cause a lot of trouble if it was taken out. The bearded man and the white-faced swordsman who had already recovered opened their eyes wide. They looked at Long Chen with a stunned expression. The bearded man walked up and patted Long Chen's shoulder, saying, "Kid, you've hidden your strength. You're only one level away from me, but your hand hammer technique is stronger than mine. Longchen smiled and threw the giant hammer back to the bearded man. He said casually, "You're just temporarily distracted by this ancient weapon. Otherwise, it wouldn't be hard to get rid of this bone soldier." Although he said so, Longchen knew that this bone soldier was actually not much different from the ancient general he had learned from the mercenary group. If it weren't for his extremely high movement technique and Emperor Realm cultivation, it wouldn't have been so easy to kill this thing. The white-faced swordsman nodded and said, "He's right. Maybe this bone soldier hasn't reached the level of an ancient general. I was a little panicked just now." The man casually glanced at Longchen and nodded slightly, as if he wasn't the one who had almost lost his life just now. Then he bent down and put away the bone medicine. He said, "Let's go. This bone medicine is not cheap. When we hand it over, we can get a lot of shares." The white-faced swordsman seemed to feel a little embarrassed to be saved by Longchen, so he was quite calm. Longchen didn't care about the bearded man. He followed behind the white-faced swordsman and walked towards the gathering point. "Bone medicine? Not bad. You three are so lucky. Did you encounter any bone soldiers?" "Just now we encountered a bone soldier and he almost killed one of us. The most unlucky thing is that there is no bone medicine around this bone soldier. This bone soldier is a little strong. Everyone be careful." While everyone was talking, the white-faced swordsman handed the bone medicine to the leader. The middle-aged leader nodded and said with satisfaction, "Swordsman, when we go back, your reward will be increased by 2 levels. The white-faced swordsman didn't nod or shake his head to refuse. He turned sideways and followed behind the team. When the bearded man in front of Longchen saw this scene, his face suddenly darkened. He opened his mouth to defend Longchen. If it weren't for Longchen, they might have lost their lives. The bone soldier was also killed by Longchen. Now the credit fell to the swordsman. It doesn't matter, seeing that the bearded man was about to stand out, Longchen put his hand on his shoulder and said lightly. Chapter 850. The mercenary group stopped 2 more times, but they didn't gain much. Seeing the sunlight gradually shift to the west, the leader didn't stop at the periphery, but went straight into the Bone Palace. They advanced at full speed for about 2 hours. The surrounding miasma had completely disappeared, but the giant trees in front of them were all withered like iron rods, as if their vitality had been taken away by some mysterious thing. Crack, crack. Everyone slowed down, and the sound of bones being crushed came from under their feet. White bones covered the ground, and there wasn't a trace of land, leading directly to a palace made of white bones. The palace was less than 1,000 meters wide, but it was incomparably gloomy, and there were white bone skulls embedded in it. These skulls were made of all kinds of demon beasts, and many human bones, which really made people shudder. "Everyone, be alert and help. The Bone Palace is a place where you can lose your life at any time." The leader of the group, a middle-aged man, was surrounded by light, and was incomparably vigilant. Everyone nodded. The Bone Palace was not like the periphery. Here, even monarch powerhouses could lose their lives if they were careless, let alone monarch powerhouses like them. The bearded man walked beside Longchen, and said in a low voice, "Pay attention to the sun in the sky. No matter what happens, you must leave the bone forbidden area before it gets dark. Even if you reach the periphery, you must be at least 1,000 meters away from the edge, or your life will be in danger." Longchen nodded, knowing that this was one of the rules that had to be followed. But immediately, he had many doubts in his heart. Based on this rule, how could the immeasurable emperor hide in the bone forbidden area until now? White Bone Divine Statue. Only the White Bone Divine Statue could protect one's life at night, which meant that it was very likely that this person found a hidden White Bone Divine Statue as a resting place. After everyone entered the palace, they spread out in groups of 3 to search for the divine medicine. They all said that as long as they could find the divine medicine for this mission, everyone would start to retreat. This was the mission of this mercenary group. They would rather earn less than risk their lives here. After everyone entered the palace, less than an hour later, 2 more mercenary groups came one after another. Remember, try your best to find dead spirit flowers and ghost fire grass, and gather at the entrance of the palace 3 hours before sunset. If Long Chen and the others were here, they would definitely be shocked. This was because the items mentioned by these 2 groups of people were exactly the same as the missions they had accepted. This kind of situation was extremely rare. The forbidden land of White Bones was fraught with danger, and the various mercenary groups had a tacit understanding, rarely accepting the same mission. This was to prevent his subordinates from fighting each other and losing their lives. Now, the 3 mercenary groups received the same mission at the same time. There could only be one reason. The rewards of this mission were enough to tempt all 3 mercenary groups. Inside the White Bone Palace, there were 10 white bone corridors on the left and right. In the center of the palace, there was an empty space that was a few meters wide. Then, there were 10 more white bone corridors on the left and right. It was as if the White Bone Palace corresponded with the center of the empty space. On both sides of the corridor, there was a giant skeletal beast every 10 meters. The giant beasts carried giant axes on their backs. At first glance, they looked like the guardians of this palace. Long Chen and the bearded man chose the 3rd corridor to enter. The one walking in front of them was still the white-clothed swordsman. This 3-man team had already been decided before they came in. Therefore, although the bearded man was unhappy, he could only do this. After stepping into the corridor, Long Chen suddenly realized. If this place was like the structure seen from the outside, the corridors would definitely intersect at the end. In this way, the entire palace seemed a little ridiculously small. At this moment, it seemed that this was not the case. The moment they stepped into this white bone corridor, many fan-shaped passages seemed to appear. This passage seemed to contain some kind of space distortion array. Long Chen kept an eye on it. Every 10 meters or so, he left a divine sense on the walls on both sides. This way, if the time was up, he could still find the way back. Rustle, rustle. The 3 of them had just walked for less than 100 breaths when a burst of dense sounds came from under their feet. The 3 of them felt uneasy. Then, they saw that there were no less than 10 white bone centipedes on the walls in all directions under their feet. White bone centipede cave, this thing can only be killed with blood essence. The bearded man waved the giant hammer in his hand. The giant hammer was stained with blood at this moment. The white-faced swordsman also touched the blade of his sword with his fingertips. A blood-red color covered it. Before the white bone centipedes rushed up, the white-faced swordsman and the white-faced swordsman had already begun to kill these white bone centipedes. The 2 of them were experienced. They knew that these white bone centipedes and the many white bone centipedes did not have high combat power, but once they were surrounded, they would be exhausted to death here. With the combat power of the 3 of them, they quickly rushed out. The tide-like insects retreated like the tide, as if nothing had happened. Trespassers, die! Before the 3 of them had time to breathe, they heard a shriveled voice. On the ground in front of them, white bones suddenly rolled and poured to both sides. In the place where the white bones broke, a 2-meter-tall giant riding a white bone wolf directly blocked the path of Long Chen and the others. This was a bone general. When the bone general appeared, bone soldiers broke out from the ground in every corner of the corridor. More than 10 bone soldiers wielded long swords and rushed towards Long Chen and the others. The bone general giant rode the white bone wolf across the sky. Formation. The bearded man and the white-faced swordsman's expressions suddenly changed. The 2 of them immediately came to Long Chen's side. Then, their hands continuously dropped Dao patterns. The 3 of them used their divine power to imprint the same Dao pattern at the same time. When the Dao patterns fell, a white light sprinkled down within 3 meters of their bodies. It forcibly blocked the bone general outside. Roar! After the bone general died, the bone soldiers frantically waved their bone swords. However, they seemed to be afraid of the white light and did not dare to cross it. The bearded man heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Our luck is really bad this time." How did we encounter such a powerful bone general when we just entered the palace? Quick, look at the wall behind the bone general. That's bone medicine. The white-faced swordsman did not seem to hear him. He stared at the wall behind the bone general with a fervent expression. Long Chen and the bearded burly man followed his gaze and saw that there were a total of 8 stalks of bone medicine on the white bone wall. The bone medicine flickered with white light. There was actually a faint Dao pattern flowing out. This bone medicine is different from the ones we saw before. There are even natural Dao patterns on its branches and leaves. Long Chen frowned. He also saw something strange. Chapter 851. Long Chen raised his eyebrows at the words of the Emperor Lord's remnant soul. His eyes scanned the wall carefully. Sure enough, he found a drop of dried blood at the root of the bone medicine. Long Chen was shocked. Just a drop of dried blood was enough to nourish 8 bone medicines with Dao patterns. However, this also meant that the immeasurable emperor was still here. At least he had passed by this place recently and accidentally left a drop of the Emperor Lord's blood here. What should we do? The statue formation won't last long. If we get these 8 bone medicines, we won't be able to retreat. We can only go deeper. The bearded man's eyes were also shining. Although they didn't know that the 8 bone medicines were nourished by the Emperor Lord's blood, they could see that it was extraordinary. The statue formation was the result of these mercenaries studying the Dao patterns on the white bone statues in the forbidden white bone district. This formation had almost no effect in the outside world. It didn't even have a trace of attack power. However, in the forbidden white bone district, it was enough to deter the bone generals. However, this formation required the combined power of 3 late-stage emperors to activate, and it consumed a lot of energy. As the 3 of them hesitated, a piercing sound came from the corridor where the white bone worm's cave was. It was followed by the sound of fighting. Let's do it. Get the 8 bone medicines and go deeper. We have to find another exit. The white-faced swordsman's eyes were shining. He didn't care whether Long Chen and the bearded man agreed or not. He took the lead and rushed forward with the formation. The bearded man was also very eager to get the 8 bone medicines. He and Long Chen followed closely to the edge of the wall. The bone generals behind them roared crazily. More and more bone soldiers began to appear. A few of the bone soldiers appeared in the white light. Their bodies burned with green flames and they disappeared. The white-faced swordsman was in front. Long Chen and the bearded man were behind him. When they got close to the wall, the white-faced swordsman waved his sword and cut the 8 bone medicines off the wall. His hand flashed and he collected them all. Let's leave this place first. The white-faced swordsman shouted. He led the 2 of them into another corridor. As soon as they entered the passageway, the white-faced swordsman was the first to collect all the Dao patterns. The white light also disappeared abruptly. The bone general and bone soldier stayed in another corridor and roared, but they seemed to be restricted by the rules and did not dare to step into the corridor they were in. When the bearded man saw Long Chen looking at him, he explained, "This white bone palace is very strange. Every time we enter the corridor, the terrain is different. However, every corridor is like a special territory. They won't rush over. This time, 8 bone medicines have appeared at once. Even the bone general's strength has increased by so much. I'm afraid only an imperial lord can suppress a bone general of this level. Although the bone medicine is in our hands, we can't go back the way we came. We can only find another exit as soon as possible. Otherwise, if we continue walking, we will reach the white bone abyss." When white bone abyss was mentioned, the bearded man couldn't help but shiver. The pale-faced swordsman's eyes also revealed a hint of fear. After saying that, the bearded man walked in front of the pale-faced swordsman and said, "Let's split the 8 bone medicines. The 3 of us will take 3 each. You have already turned in 1 previously. This time, you will only get 2. Hearing this, the pale-faced swordsman frowned and said in a low voice, "These 3 are yours." The pale-faced swordsman waved his right hand and took out 3 bone medicines from his storage ring. He handed them to the bearded man. Then, he slowly walked in front of Longchen and said indifferently, "You are still a newbie. You are quite lucky to have followed the team this time. Take this bone medicine for now." Longchen looked at the pale-faced swordsman and suddenly revealed a playful smile. He didn't reach out to take the bone medicine. The pale-faced swordsman's eyes suddenly shrank and emitted a wisp of coldness. Seeing this, the bearded man shouted, "Swordsman, although Longxing is a newbie, he is also at the 8th level of the martial emperor realm. There's not much difference between you and him. Don't go too far. Moreover, the bone medicine is not a mission item. You have to take at least 2 to keep one." The pale-faced swordsman acted as if he didn't hear the bearded man's words. He just narrowed his eyes and asked Longchen, "A newbie should act like a newbie. Do you want this bone medicine?" Longchen looked at the pale-faced swordsman with a faint smile and said indifferently, "Of course I want this bone medicine. But I want the other 4 bone medicines in your hand, Rumble." As soon as Longchen finished speaking, he suddenly punched out. The pale-faced swordsman didn't even have the chance to react. His whole body hit the wall of the corridor heavily. A bloody hole appeared in his chest and blood flowed out. For a moment, the bearded man was stunned and looked at Longchen in shock. The pale-faced swordsman was at the 9th level of the martial emperor realm. His cultivation was higher than both of them. But Longchen defeated him with a single punch. It was unbelievable. The pale-faced swordsman on the ground looked very gloomy. He stared at Longchen and said, "You are at the great perfection of the martial emperor realm." Just as he finished speaking, Longchen had already sent a kick at him. The pale-faced swordsman's long sword suddenly rolled up and the divine light around him condensed and slashed towards Longchen. Bang! With a loud bang, Longchen's kick actually shattered his divine light. Even his long sword was broken into several pieces. Half of the pale-faced swordsman's body turned into powder. Longchen bent down and looked at the pale-faced swordsman with a faint smile. "I said give me all the bone medicines you just got. Or do you want me to take them myself?" The pale-faced swordsman's gloominess was swept away and replaced with fear. With a wave of his hand, he took out all 5 bone medicines and handed them to Longchen. He didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Longchen didn't bother to look at him and let him recover his body. On the other side, the bearded man was frozen in place. When Longchen turned around, he even subconsciously took 2 steps back. Longchen smiled bitterly, "No need to be like this. I mean you no harm. Let's continue." The bearded man's hand flashed and he walked to Longchen's side and said, "I'll give these 3 to you too. You seem to care a lot about these bone medicines." Longchen looked at the bearded man and didn't argue. He nodded and took the bone medicines. "Follow me. I'll take more for you." The 2 continued to walk deeper into the corridor. The pale-faced swordsman lay on the ground and his body recovered quickly. He didn't dare to follow Longchen anymore. Chapter 852. The Ancient Snake Mercenary Band was one of the top mercenaries in the Forbidden Bone District. Longchen's mercenary band couldn't compare to them at all. They had 4 great perfection great emperors. The rest of the members were also powerful great perfection great emperors. Any one of them could easily crush the pale-faced swordsman. The pale-faced swordsman's heart skipped a beat when he saw the Ancient Snake Mercenary Band. There was even a great perfection great emperor in their group. "Oh, it's you, pretty boy." A large, fierce-looking man stepped forward with a mocking expression. Another man narrowed his eyes and asked in a low voice, "The medicinal energy on the wall behind the bone general has not dissipated. There are at least 7 or 8 of them. Where are the bone herbs?" The white-faced swordsman saw that these people did not come with good intentions, and his heart suddenly moved. He immediately bowed and said, "The bone medicine is not in my hands. I was betrayed by the 2 of them and was severely injured here. The 8 stalks of bone medicine with Tao patterns were all stolen by them. If you don't mind, can I join the Ancient Snake Mercenary Band? I know their mission and how to mark them. When the time comes, the 5 members of the ancient snake mercenary band looked amused when they heard this. The Great Perfection Great Emperor in the lead sneered. Very well. If we can take all the items from your mercenary band, I'll make an exception and accept you into the ancient snake mercenary band. Before that, I'm very curious about the 8 bone herbs with Tao patterns you mentioned. On the other side. In an hour, Long Chen and the bearded man had passed through 3 corridors. They killed 7 bone soldiers and obtained 10 bone herbs. However, there was no Tao pattern on the bone herbs, nor was there any aura of Great Emperor blood. Long Chen gave these 10 stalks of bone medicine to the bearded man. The bearded man was now following behind Long Chen, and his entire person was practically stunned. Only now did he realize that Long Chen wasn't some great circle Emperor realm expert. He was completely an Emperor realm expert through and through. Let's go to the next corridor. Long Chen led the bearded man deeper into the Forbidden Bone District. The bearded man hurriedly stopped Long Chen. He scraped a lot of bone powder from the wall and smeared it on his body. The man said, "This is already the 6th corridor. Anyone who enters must apply the bone powder on their body. Otherwise, they will encounter a skeleton general every 10 meters. Furthermore, their strength increases in order." In the past, even imperial emperors have died here. Long Chen nodded slightly. The bearded man did not have bad intentions. Moreover, with Long Chen taking the lead, the opportunities that he would obtain would be something that he would never have dared to imagine in the past. There were many strange laws within the White Bone Palace. If he was not careful, even Long Chen could not guarantee that he would be able to walk out. The bearded man was quite familiar with this place, which made up for Long Chen's shortcomings. In the 6th corridor, all 4 walls were blood red, and the corridor stretched on endlessly. Who knew how long it would take to reach the next corridor? "Senior, don't tell me you want to enter the White Bone Abyss?" The bearded man seemed to have a lingering fear when he mentioned the White Bone Abyss. Long Chen did not reply. However, if the immeasurable emperor was really hiding in the White Bone Abyss, then he could only make a trip there. The imperial emperor's physical body was his hope of quickly advancing. He was naturally prepared for the dangers. There are still 3 more corridors. No matter where you enter from, as long as you pass through 9 corridors, you can fall into the White Bone Abyss at any time. The bearded man reminded Long Chen. Long Chen nodded and replied, "If I still don't find what I need in the 9th corridor, I will send you out." The bearded man's face was filled with gratitude. He followed behind Long Chen and continued to advance. After walking for less than 100 meters, Long Chen's pupils suddenly shrank. He saw a huge swastika on the wall. According to the information that Shu San gave him, the sole skill that the immeasurable emperor cultivated was the swastika mantra. It seemed that Long Chen's luck was not bad. The immeasurable emperor must have come here before. Rumble. 3 bone soldiers crossed a few meters and stood on saber-toothed tigers, blocking the way again. These bone soldiers had a terrifying aura. Flames danced in their eyes, and they seemed to have developed intelligence. The bearded man subconsciously retreated dozens of meters. A casual attack from a bone soldier of this level was enough to crush his soul. Even Long Chen had to be extremely careful if he wanted to get rid of them with his Imperial Emperor cultivation. If he was not careful, he would be heavily injured by the bone blade. The bone blade in the bone soldier's hand could already injure the soul of an Imperial Emperor. It was extremely terrifying. This is an undying bone general. Don't think about killing them. If there's nothing you need here, think of a way to quickly pass through. The bearded man saw that Long Chen had defeated the first bone general and was about to stand up again. He immediately shouted. Long Chen nodded. Protective draconic power circulated around his body, and his battle techniques were unleashed to the extreme. In addition to his powerful movement techniques, he destroyed the 3 bone generals. At the same time, he also discovered that there was a gap on the left about 10 meters away from the end of the corridor. After killing the 3 bone generals, Long Chen shouted to the bearded man, "Quickly come over." There seems to be a way out in front. The bearded man was immediately overjoyed. He immediately wanted to rush over. Poochie. However, at this moment, a long blade swept through the air and nailed him to the blood-colored wall. 5 members of the Bone Snake mercenary band led the pale-faced swordsman over from the 5th corridor. The one who had attacked was none other than their leader, a peak stage Soul Emperor. Their faces were full of ridicule. However, when they looked at Long Chen, they did not relax at all. In their opinion, someone who could pass through all 6 corridors of the Bone Palace was no ordinary person. I didn't expect a second-rate mercenary band to have such an expert. They looked at Long Chen gravely when they saw the 3 undying bone generals forming at Long Chen's feet. Although they had not seen Long Chen kill the undying bone generals with their own eyes, the fact that he could defeat 3 bone generals meant that he was one of the strongest Great Circle Emperors. Poochie Poochie. The bearded man was nailed to the wall, blood pouring out of his mouth. The long blade in his chest was covered in Dao runes. As he spoke, the Great Circle Emperor stepped forward and stepped on the long blade in the bearded man's chest. The intense pain immediately caused the bearded man to scream miserably. The Great Circle Emperor glared at Long Chen. Hand over everything you've obtained along the way. Otherwise, I'll send him to his death. The white-faced swordsman saw this and sneered. Aren't you just a Great Circle Emperor? You hid your cultivation and stole my bone medicine. Looks like you won't be able to swallow it. Chapter 853. The 6 of them sneered when they heard Long Chen's words. In their opinion, although Long Chen was a great perfection martial emperor, it was unrealistic for him to fight the 6 of them alone. Moreover, there were still 3 undying bone generals behind him. But when they saw Long Chen attack, their faces were filled with fear. The great perfection martial emperor quickly fled the way he came. Emperor, you're an emperor. Emperor, please spare us, we know we're wrong. No, please spare us, Emperor. When the remaining people saw Long Chen waving his hand, boundless pressure surged over like a tidal wave. They immediately knelt on the ground. However, before they could finish their words, their bodies and even their souls were instantly crushed into powder. Pfft! Only the peak stage Soul Emperor coughed up a mouthful of blood. Using a secret technique, he charged into the 5th corridor and disappeared. Long Chen snorted. If he wasn't afraid that the great perfection martial emperor would kill the bearded man before he died, he wouldn't have given him a chance to live. Seeing that the 3 undying bone generals were about to be revived, Long Chen waved his right hand and restrained the bearded man. He also picked up the bone medicines on the wall. The 3 undying bone generals were guarding a total of 10 bone medicines. Long Chen looked at the 10 bone medicines and raised his eyebrows. He murmured, "These bone medicines are 10 times more powerful than the ones before." The bearded man pulled out the long sword from his chest. His face looked better, and he began to recover his body. Senior, from the 6th corridor onwards, the medicinal properties of the bone medicines will increase greatly. Compared to the 5th corridor, the 6th corridor's medicinal properties are much more powerful. The bearded man said, "Senior, please listen to me. You can't go to the White Bone Abyss. It's said that there's an undying bone king in the White Bone Abyss. He's equivalent to a divine king. It's said that these bone medicines are formed from the undying chi in his body." Undying Bone King? When Long Chen heard this, he remembered the bearded man's words and asked the Emperor Lord's remnant soul with his mind. However, the Emperor Lord's remnant soul did not know anything about the Undying Bone King. Thinking about it, Long Chen smiled bitterly and felt relieved. The Archlord's remnant soul was originally a realm lord. It was already rare for him to remember a portion of the human race's godly monarchs. This Undying Bone King was born from a different kind of cultivation. With his status as a sector lord, he naturally wouldn't pay attention to it. When Long Chen saw that the bearded man's body had almost recovered, he said, "Tell me what I need to pay attention to. I'll walk the rest of the way myself." As soon as he finished speaking, Long Chen looked at the crack at the edge of the 6th corridor. Beyond this crack was another corridor, and it wasn't blood-red. The bearded man seemed to agree with Long Chen's words. He knew that if he continued to follow Long Chen, he would only become a burden to Long Chen. He stood at the edge of the 7th corridor and looked into the crack. Immediately, he was overjoyed and said, "This crack leads to the 2nd corridor. It's also one of the rare life doors in the White Bone Palace. Once someone passes through, they'll be sealed by the white bones within 3 breaths. Senior, are you really not leaving with me?" Long Chen shook his head and handed over a few bone medicines obtained from the 6th corridor to the bearded man. The bearded man insisted on not accepting them. He only signaled Long Chen to help him block the 3 undying bone generals so that he could safely pass through the crack. "Senior, I hope to see you again. If there's anything you need, just let me know." After the bearded man finished speaking, he leaped into the crack. Long Chen pushed the undying bone general away with a punch and was about to continue to the 7th corridor. "Senior, there's also Tao Rhythm bone medicine here." The bearded man's voice passed through the crack as it was covered by the white bones. Hearing this, Long Chen's body suddenly stiffened. He suddenly frowned. If there was Tao Rhythm bone medicine on the other side, didn't that mean that the Realm Lord's blood had also appeared in the other corridor? After pondering for a moment, Long Chen still chose to continue to the other 3 corridors in the White Bone Palace. The great perfection monarch who escaped from Long Chen's hands had a lingering fear on his face. He never thought that he would meet an emperor in the White Bone Palace. Although there were many bone medicines in the White Bone Forbidden Area, these things were nothing to an emperor. It was rare for an emperor to come here. Could it be that this person is also here for that treasure? The person's pupils suddenly shrank. Then, he sneered and rushed back to the corridor he came from. Seeing that the sky was turning dark, more and more people began to retreat from the White Bone Palace. Late at night, for any mercenary group, was the prelude to death. The bearded man was safe and sound at this moment. Fortunately, there were others who just happened to step into the 2nd corridor to fight for the Tao Rhythm bone medicine. He and the mercenaries gathered and did not talk about Long Chen. Everyone was too lazy to ask. Everyone's face was incomparably gloomy. They had suffered heavy losses this time. Including the bearded man, there were only 9 people who walked out of the White Bone Palace. 3 mercenary groups accepted the same mission and fought in the White Bone Palace. Moreover, there was a mercenary group like Bone Snake participating. All the mercenary groups quickly gathered outside the White Bone Palace. Then, they roared and provoked. However, no one dared to make a move. They were very clear that it was important to leave the White Bone Palace before the sky turned dark. Did that person die in there? The bearded man scanned the surroundings. He did not find the person who escaped from Long Chen's hands. "Let's go. We have to get out before the sky turns dark. Damn it. We suffered heavy losses this time. Leader, why did you accept the same mission as the other 2 mercenary groups?" Complaints rose one after another. The bearded man was also urged to leave the White Bone Forbidden Area. After around 2 hours, when they reached the outskirts of the Forbidden Area, they saw a group of people rushing into the Forbidden Area. Another group of idiots. Aren't they looking for death by entering the Forbidden Area at this time? Don't bother. Let's leave this damned place quickly. Otherwise, even if it's the outskirts, it's very likely that we will die here. That's not right. There were 2 Emperor experts in the group just now. That aura can't be wrong. Everyone exclaimed. They were very curious about the Emperor experts entering the White Bone Forbidden Area. The bearded man looked at the sky from afar. There were 4 people who were flying into the Forbidden Area. The 4 of them were carrying the Great Perfection Martial Emperor who had been defeated by Long Chen. Could it be that they were going for Long Chen? What are you waiting for? Hurry up and get out. The sun is setting. Following this shout, everyone hurriedly left the White Bone Forbidden Area. Night fell. Chapter 854. Roar. Night fell. The various large mercenary groups and the people who had entered the Forbidden Zone stood outside. Apart from the large mercenary groups, there were less than 100 people left alive. Ah! Shrill cries rose and fell one after another. Shrill and terrifying cries could be heard from within the darkness. Accompanying these shrill cries was the terrifying sound of a monster's death. The earth seemed to have begun to shake. There seemed to be a 10,000-year-old source beast rampaging in the darkness, causing everyone to instinctively retreat 1,000 meters away. When night fell, there were probably 100 or 200 people who had died in the outer perimeter. These people did not believe in the terror of the darkness. The bearded man stared at the darkness and muttered to himself, "I hope you can walk out of it, on the other side." At this moment, Long Chen was standing at the end of the 9th corridor. Beside him was a white bone statue. The statue was white as jade. Its skull was a kind of mammoth source beast, and its body was no different from a human skeleton. Not far from the white bone statue, there was a trace of a drop of dried blood. There's a terrifying aura in the darkness that can shatter the soul of a monarch. Just now, a bone general was strengthened to the level of a bone commander. Long Chen looked at the white brilliance sprinkled by the statue with a rather fearful expression. Long Chen thought of the bearded man's words. Could there really be a white bone creature near the level of a divine king in the white bone abyss? But now that this drop of blood had appeared here, could the immeasurable emperor really have gone down to the white bone abyss? The bone soldiers here were ranked according to their battle strength. This white bone creature at the level of a bone commander was almost equivalent to the battle strength of a monarch. If the immeasurable emperor really went down to the white bone abyss, then even if it was dangerous, Long Chen would have to give it a try. Roar! 2 white bones of bone commanders wandered in the corridor. As they roared, their bodies emitted a terrifying aura of death. The ghost fire in their eye sockets pulsed. Their intelligence was probably not weaker than a human's. Under such circumstances, even Long Chen did not dare to continue moving in the darkness. Although Long Chen stood below the white bone statue, he did not dare to relax in the slightest. He could only wait for the night to pass. In his boredom, he turned around and looked at the many Taoist patterns on the white bone statue. The divine light that was enough to dispel the darkness was emitted by these dazzling Tao patterns. The densely packed Tao patterns almost covered the entire body of the white bone statue, making it look incomparably holy. Many mercenary groups were able to survive in the white bone forbidden zone because they had done a lot of research on the Tao patterns on the statues. It was rumored that many powerful forces had come here to study the runes, but to no avail. Although this formation pattern was mysterious and unfathomable, once it left the white bone forbidden area, it would no longer be of any use. This is the Tao pattern of the immoral Buddha race. It can dispel evil spirits and suppress ghosts. The Emperor Lord's remnant soul explained to Long Chen. Immortal Buddha tribe? When Long Chen heard the voice of the Sovereign Lord's remnant soul, he knew that this clan was definitely not ordinary. Over the past few days, all the divine clans that the Emperor Lord's remnant soul had some impression of were either special or had a long history. The Emperor Lord's remnant soul continued, this clan has long been annihilated in the long river of history. It seems that they completely disappeared 3,000 years after I became the World Lord. Now, from the looks of this statue and the complete Tao patterns, this should be the sacrificial altar left behind by this clan. Sacrificial altar? Long Chen could not help but take in a breath of cold air. It seemed like the rumors were true. This white bone abyss was really suppressing a white bone creature that was comparable to a god king. Don't worry too much. After such a long time, even a god king would not be able to survive until now. The Emperor Lord's remnant soul continued, although this white bone abyss is strange, it is definitely not something suppressed by the immoral Buddha race. The immoral Buddha race was born with great wisdom and they followed the principle of equality. Their clansmen roamed the world all year round to suppress evil spirits. They even had a coronation method that allowed their clansmen to spread throughout the ancient sacred god world. Back then, their reputation was quite good. After chatting for a while, seeing that Long Chen was fine, the Emperor Lord's remnant soul asked Longchen to try to imprint the Tao patterns on the statue. According to him, the true use of the Tao patterns was not to attack or to suppress humans. However, it was very powerful in stabilizing the soul and suppressing evil spirits. Longchen tried to decipher the Tao patterns and imprint them into his mind. After looking at them for a while, he suddenly looked at the foot of the statue. Then, a smile appeared on his face. After a loud shout, he actually pulled the entire statue out from the white bone abyss and carried it on his shoulder. Rumble. The statue rose from the ground. Longchen felt that there was really a giant god behind him that wanted to suppress him. The terrifying power caused his breathing to quicken. Buzz. Longchen hurriedly circulated the primal chaos golden codex. Then, he used his right hand to inscribe part of the array patterns that he had learned from the mercenary group. The array patterns fell. The white light around Longchen's body actually fused with the stone statue. The pressure on his back suddenly disappeared. Instead, the holy white light made Longchen's body and mind feel relaxed. It was as if his state of mind had begun to improve. Woo woo woo. Longchen carried the statue on his back. The white bone abyss creatures that appeared around him all prostrated themselves at midnight. They did not even dare to look at him. Let me see if there's blood in the other corridors. Longchen murmured. There were traces of sweat on his forehead. Although he had merged the Tao patterns with the statue, even circulating the primal chaos golden codex was very strenuous. Longchen carried the statue on his back and walked back the way he came. He had to stop every 100 meters to recover for more than 10 breaths. He walked back from the 9th corridor. Along the way, all the bone soldiers and bone generals that Longchen saw turned into bone generals under the invasion of darkness. With such a lineup, even a late-stage Emperor Lord would probably die without the suppression of the statue. After an hour, Longchen had already arrived at another corridor. The bone medicine here seemed to have been picked, but a new sprout was growing healthily in the darkness. There really is blood here. Longchen frowned and continued to walk back. He went back and forth several times. Longchen's entire face darkened. In the entire White Bone Palace, at the end of the 2nd and 9th corridors, there was a drop of the Emperor Lord's blood. The intention behind this was too obvious. If an Emperor Lord came here, as long as he observed carefully, regardless of whether he could recognize the Emperor Lord's blood, he would be lured into the White Bone Abyss. This could even cause people to retreat without a fight and completely lose the chance to find the so-called treasure. The White Bone Forbidden Area was like a land of death at night. Most people did not dare to stay in it. Even Longchen would not have chosen to stay if he had not coincidentally encountered the statue at the end of the 9th corridor. Chapter 855. More than half of the night had passed. At most, there were 2 to 4 hours before the sky would brighten. Longchen was already walking out of the Palace of Bones. The scene was extremely strange. Behind him, there were close to 100 skeletal creatures following him from afar. They roared continuously, as if they were extremely angry. Longchen put down the statue to rest. He looked back at the skeletal creatures and couldn't help but laugh. Don't worry. In another half a month, those bone herbs will grow again. As his voice fell, the skeletal creatures roared even more fiercely. In one night, Longchen walked a total of 8 corridors. 2 of them had not been explored at all. As for the other few, only the first 3 corridors had been harvested. Walking with such a statue on his back, Longchen didn't want to return empty-handed. Therefore, regardless of whether the bone herbs had Tao rhythm or not, they were all taken by him. As for the skeletal creatures behind him, he was not afraid at all. Although using the Primal Chaos Golden Codex to carry the statue forward made him feel extremely tired, it was not a problem to walk out of the Forbidden White Bone District. Since he knew that the immeasurable Emperor was very likely not in the Forbidden White Bone District, or at least not in the White Bone Abyss, Longchen planned to leave first. After resting for a while, Longchen walked out of the palace again. When he walked to the entrance of the palace, he stopped again. Because there was a group of people standing under the statue at the side of the entrance. The group of 5 stared at Long Chen. When they saw that he was carrying a statue on his back, their expressions were extremely strange. There was such a thing? Long Chen saw that the person at the front of the group was actually the Great Perfection Emperor. He let go, and a cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Long Chen carried the statue and slowly walked to a place more than 10 meters away from them. Then he said, "These are the bone herbs I found. I'll leave them to you." After that, Long Chen took out 15 to 16 ordinary bone herbs and threw them at the statue where no one was. Each bone herb landed in the holy light without any deviation. Some even fell directly into the Great Perfection Emperor's arms. Roar! The bone commanders roared furiously, but they dared not approach due to the radiance of Long Chen and the other statue. Damned humans! Only a bone commander spoke in human language, riding the bone beast he was sitting on to the front. Although the strength of these bone commanders had surged, it was all due to the terrifying presence in the darkness that had forcefully increased their strength. Although their soul sense had increased slightly, it was not by much. For example, this bone commander, who could speak the human language, would probably be able to fight against an imperial emperor even if it was a knight. "Brat, are you trying to trick us?" The 5 of them stood under the statue and looked at the hundreds of skeletal creatures with ashen faces. The old man reacted and felt a chill run down his spine. He hurriedly tried to throw the bone medicine away. "It's useless even if you toss it out. These skeletons won't care if you've been wronged or not." An imperial monarch snorted coldly. The 2 imperial monarchs were still relatively calm, but the other 3 Great Perfection Emperors were already drenched in cold sweat. Long Chen looked back at them and said, "You don't look like you're here to make friends with me. Then you can wait here. I'll take my leave first." When they saw that Long Chen was about to leave, one of them shouted explosively, "Immeasurable monarch, hand over that precious treasure. Otherwise, do you think that you'll still be able to survive after leaving the forbidden region of white bones?" Long Chen's feet suddenly stopped, and the statue behind him was also smashed to the ground. He stared at the 2 imperial monarchs and narrowed his eyes, saying coldly, "Who told you I'm the immeasurable emperor?" Long Chen was very puzzled. How had he become the immeasurable emperor after taking a trip out of the forbidden zone? The immeasurable emperor is proficient in the art of disguise. Even sovereigns won't be able to tell if they don't check carefully. The Bone Snake mercenaries have been monitoring the forbidden zone. You're the first imperial monarch to appear after the immeasurable emperor entered this place. If you're not the immeasurable emperor, then who are you? Moreover, rumor has it that the immeasurable emperor is very familiar with the forbidden zone. The Great Perfection Emperor of the Bone Snake mercenaries shouted loudly. Long Chen pondered for a moment and suddenly laughed loudly. Then, he carried the statue on his back and walked out of the forbidden zone. The 2 imperial monarchs and 3 Great Perfection Emperors saw this and wanted to try carrying the statue on their backs as well. They had just carried the idols over their shoulders, and after taking 2 steps, they were almost crushed by the bodies of the idols. The few of them took turns to imitate the Long Chen Revolution mercenary group's Dao pattern. Even so, the few of them only managed to take a few steps. That bastard must be the immeasurable emperor. Otherwise, how could he carry this thing in the dark? The 2 imperial monarchs gritted their teeth. The 3 Great Perfection Emperors didn't care about the immeasurable emperor at all. They only said in trembling voices, "There are at least 100 skeletons surrounding us. Once dawn comes and they return to their territories, I'm afraid they'll tear us apart." Long Chen listened to these people's cries and screams, but his heart was incomparably clear. He already knew where the immeasurable emperor was hiding. He wasn't in the forbidden zone at all. Shu San and the others from the Imperial Monarch School had general information about the person who had obtained the immeasurable emperor's body, but it wasn't very detailed. They didn't plan on creating such a book in the short term. After all, if this matter was made public, it would cause chaos in the Northern Foot territory and even the ancient sacred god realm. If the immeasurable emperor really did have a disguise technique that could fool sovereigns, then after today's events, Long Chen could more or less confirm his identity. He wasn't in the forbidden zone, but he wasn't far from it. He was looking for a scapegoat. The forbidden zone seemed peaceful, but in reality, there were several imperial monarchs hiding in various places. Their target was the immeasurable emperor. The sky gradually brightened and the sun rose from the east. The skeletons in the Palace of Bones roared in unwillingness as they retreated. Long Chen carried the statue and walked to the outskirts of the forbidden zone. The statue's radiance was restrained, but it couldn't be stored in a storage ring. After Long Chen confirmed that there was no one around, he charged straight out of the forbidden zone. Behind him, divine light erupted into the heavens. The sound of heaven-shaking explosions rang out continuously. A great battle was erupting outside the Palace of Bones. After leaving the forbidden zone, he immediately concealed his cultivation again. With the immeasurable emperor's remnant soul present, even sovereigns couldn't see through his true cultivation. Although Long Chen left the forbidden zone, he didn't immediately leave. Instead, he stayed in the vicinity. Within the Palace of Bones, the sounds of 2 imperial monarchs and 3 great perfection sovereigns fighting with the skeletons quickly spread. In less than an hour, another 3 imperial monarchs appeared and charged into the Palace of Bones. Seeing this, Long Chen was even more certain of his thoughts. Not only did he not have any thoughts of entering the forbidden zone again, he instead charged straight towards the nearest city. Chapter 856. Within Ziqing City, Long Chen was the first to find the other 2 mercenary groups apart from the Bone Snake mercenary group and took down their mercenary group leaders. This was too easy for an emperor like him. With the emperor's remnant soul, he was almost certain that these 2 people were only at the great circle of the emperor realm. As he guessed, there was only one person who was most likely to be the emperor. The leader of the Bone Snake mercenary group. This person was most likely the immeasurable emperor. Long Chen flew to the streets near the city's south gate and entered the Bone Snake mercenary group's camp. With his emperor cultivation and powerful movement technique, no one noticed his arrival. Under the cover of the emperor's remnant soul, Long Chen began to wander around the courtyard. He carved Dao patterns one by one and took out a rare bone medicine with Dao rhythm to use as the eye of the formation. The bone medicine fell into the formation and disappeared without a trace as if it had never appeared. It was already evening by the time he finished all this. At this time, Long Chen walked into the inner hall. The leader of the Bone Snake mercenary group was lying on the bed in the inner hall. There was even a woman lying beside him. Whoosh! A ray of light shot out from Long Chen's finger and entered the woman's forehead, causing her to faint. The leader of the Bone Snake mercenary group, Shuiyiqing, stared at Long Chen with an ashen face and shouted, "Brat, do you want to die? Do you know where this is?" Long Chen looked at Shuiyiqing with a smile and said indifferently, "You're quite good at acting." As Long Chen finished speaking, another ray of divine light shot out and attacked Shuiyiqing's waist. Whoosh! Blood spurted out and Shuiyiqing's face became incomparably terrified. He looked at Long Chen and cried out involuntarily, "Imperial Monarch Powerhouse, Senior, spare my life, spare my life." Long Chen's smile grew wider. This person's acting was truly heaven-defying. A mid-stage emperor was actually so humble in front of him. "Keep pretending. My next move will cripple one of your legs." Long Chen sneered. As soon as he finished speaking, another beam of divine light shot out. Bang! When the divine light descended, the originally terrified Shuiyiqing's expression suddenly turned cold. With a slap, she dispersed Long Chen's attack. Shuiyiqing slowly stood up and put on her clothes. She stared at Long Chen and smiled. "Amateus Buddha, how can you be so sure that I am the immeasurable emperor?" Long Chen laughed and said, "If you continue to act for half a day, maybe I'll believe you after I break both your legs." That being said, In fact, ever since Long Chen entered the room, the Emperor Lord's remnant soul had already confirmed that Shui Yiqing was an Emperor Lord. Long Chen continued, "You could have left, but you purposely left clues in the forbidden land of white bones to find a scapegoat. Instead, you chose to be the leader of a mercenary group. You are really smart. Most likely, within the white bone forbidden zone, the 4 imperial emperors were at the stage of suspecting each other and fighting." With Long Chen's words, Shui Yiqing didn't say anything else. Rays of multicolored light flickered on his face and finally turned into a handsome middle-aged man. This person's appearance was rather kind and delicate. However, there was not a single strand of black hair on his head. Instead, there were 9 rings on his head. He stared at Long Chen and pressed his palms together. "Benefactor, are you also here for the treasure in my hand? However, with your early-stage Imperial Emperor cultivation, I'm afraid you won't be able to defeat me." Long Chen had already exposed his strength. The immeasurable Emperor did not panic. After all, he had the cultivation of a 4th-stage Imperial Emperor. Such a realm was enough to easily suppress Long Chen, who had just become an Imperial Emperor. Long Chen shook his head and grabbed at the air with his right hand. A dim light condensed in all directions in the entire courtyard, emitting endless killing intent. The immeasurable Emperor's expression suddenly changed. A broken porcelain bowl suddenly appeared in his right hand. The porcelain bowl was covered in cracks, as if it would shatter at any moment. However, just as this person moved, multicolored light bloomed in the sky as if there were Taoist rhymes flowing. Under his movement, the surrounding formation patterns suddenly stopped. "When did you set up a formation around my courtyard?" The immeasurable Emperor was shocked and angry. His cultivation was at the mid-stage Imperial Emperor, and his courtyard was only dozens of meters in size. If someone had set up such a complicated formation outside, it was impossible for him not to notice. Long Chen looked at the porcelain bowl and frowned slightly. He had asked the Imperial Emperor's remnant soul to conceal his aura and set up a formation here with the fragment of the World Suppression Cauldron. He thought he could take this person down directly, but he did not expect that the porcelain bowl in this person's hand was actually an extremely powerful artifact that could resist for a while. However, he was not worried. Although this formation was not as powerful as the one that killed 4 Imperial Emperors and 300,000 Imperial Emperors, with his early-stage Imperial Emperor cultivation and the power of the formation, it was more than enough to suppress a mid-stage Imperial Emperor. After all, he had faced 4 late-stage Imperial Emperors and even perfected Imperial Emperors. Long Chen stared at the immeasurable Emperor and said in a low voice, "Hand over the item in your hand, and I swear I won't kill you today." Crack, crack, crack. As Long Chen's voice fell, the cracks on the porcelain bowl in the immeasurable Emperor's hand became denser, as if it would shatter at any moment. "Amateus Buddha, if I let you take me down like this, I'm afraid I won't be alive now." The person shouted coldly. The porcelain bowl in his hand shattered with a loud bang. However, in the next moment, a sundial appeared in his hand. The sundial swayed and blocked the dim light that was about to fall. When Long Chen saw this, rays of light flowed around his right hand. He reached out and landed on the wall of the room. The dim light in all directions began to condense at a speed visible to the naked eye. The shadow of a huge cauldron appeared mightily. Boom, crack, crack. The huge cauldron appeared, and the dim light moved again. The light from the sundial in the person's hand was shattered. Immeasurable F** King Buddha, what exactly is the array head of your array? How can it have such a powerful suppressive force? The immeasurable Emperor's entire face began to twitch. He looked at the sundial on the ground with a pained expression. When Long Chen looked over, the array in his hand trembled. This guy actually took out 2 artifacts with extraordinary pressure when he put his palms together. Seeing this, Long Chen's entire face darkened. He couldn't help but mock. "It's said that monks don't care about worldly possessions. Today, I've seen it for myself. Your Excellency really has nothing on you. Monks don't lie. These are the last 2 items in my hand. If you can still suppress The immeasurable emperor's voice trailed off, and his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Only to hear two crisp sounds enter the two's ears. The artifacts on his left and right hands were once again cracked from the pressure. Immeasurable King Hell, what the hell is this cauldron? It's obviously just an earthly origin suppressive killing array. How can it increase its power to such a terrifying level? The immeasurable emperor's entire face was flushed with blood. He cursed angrily. Damn bald donkey, you're full of lies. Long Chen's hands slammed on the array in the room. The primal chaos golden codex in his body was running wildly. This guy just said that monks don't lie, and now he took out 4 more artifacts. Back and forth. Long Chen even had the thought of killing this person and taking his treasures. Now that the sun had set, the world suppression cauldron's pressure couldn't take him down. The broken artifacts under this person's feet were almost piled up into a small hill. I'm done. As long as you give me the array head and the cauldron, I'll give you everything in my hand. The immeasurable emperor shouted. Long Chen snorted coldly and ignored this person. This damn bald donkey didn't speak a single word of truth. Not to mention that Long Chen wouldn't give him the world suppression cauldron's fragment. Even if he was willing, this guy would probably tell him that he only had 1 artifact in his possession. Alright, young benefactor, spare people where you can. If you continue to fight, I'll really have to fight with my life on the line. Amateus. This person seemed to be admitting defeat. I'm a monk? Long Chen almost laughed out of anger. If this person called him poor, all the emperors in the world would probably cut their own throats. Even though this person said so, Long Chen had no intention of stopping immediately. Who knew if this person was telling the truth? This guy's body was surrounded by rays of golden light that formed a swastika. His eyes were filled with killing intent. All right. I swear that as long as you hand over the Realm Master's body, I won't kill you today. Long Chen suddenly swore. Even the immeasurable emperor couldn't react in time. Just as Long Chen finished speaking, the immeasurable emperor's face darkened. He was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. He had already activated his secret technique and was ready to fight with his life on the line. However, Long Chen had interrupted him at this time. Seeing that the dim light around him had stopped falling, the immeasurable emperor suppressed the anger in his heart. He slowly gave Long Chen a thumbs up and said, Young benefactor, you're the first person in so many years to make me suffer a loss in terms of array artifacts. Today, I'm convinced, I was lucky to obtain this Realm Master's body. I couldn't comprehend its mysteries at all. I could only peek at the patterns on it. However, I've already gained a lot of understanding of array formations. From today onwards, this item is yours. This person's words caused Long Chen's heart to surge with excitement. Just the patterns on the Realm Master's body were enough to show the mysteries of his array formations. It was obvious how terrifying it was. However, according to the Realm Master's remnant soul, most people didn't know how to use the source of his body for their own use. Using a method like the corpse world was simply a huge waste. If the Realm Master's internal organs were handed over to Long Chen, he was confident that he could make Long Chen become a divine king or even a divine emperor in a few decades. However, today, the Realm Master's internal organs were destroyed. What he truly obtained was only the Realm Masters who had inherited the Realm Master's legacy. These people might have unlimited potential, but it was impossible for them to cultivate to a heaven-defying level. Thinking about this, Long Chen became more and more excited. After the immeasurable emperor finished speaking, he waved his right hand and threw out a ray of light. An item wrapped in black cloth was thrown at Long Chen. Long Chen's right hand caught it. He suddenly felt his blood and even his soul begin to boil. Chapter 857. It would be best to kill such a dishonest person. When Long Chen heard the words of the immortal emperor's remnant soul, a murderous intent emerged in his heart. This person was full of lies, and he had an endless supply of treasures and weapons. If he let him go today, there would be endless trouble if this person came back to seek revenge. You have a good eye. The items are all here. Don't forget the oath you just made. Another item wrapped in black cloth was thrown to Long Chen. Long Chen subconsciously took the item, but his face immediately turned gloomy. Not only was this person's disguise skill good, but his judgment of the situation was also not lazy. Long Chen had just made up his mind to kill this person with the formation, and he had already handed over the item. If Long Chen made a move again, he would be breaking the oath. Monks don't lie, and you shouldn't have so many treasures. How about I help you keep these items? Long Chen smiled and shook his head. Rumble. Just as he finished speaking, rays of dim light fell from the world suppression cauldron's shadow above. F***CK, the sky full of shadows crashed onto the immeasurable emperor, and his entire person was drowned in it. Miserable screams could be heard, and after a short while, a few rays of golden light shot toward Long Chen. I'll give them all to you, I'll give them all to you. The immeasurable emperor was like a frosted eggplant, and he stared at Long Chen with resentment. Long Chen's eyes flashed, and he secretly praised himself for being decisive. Otherwise, it would be a pity to let this person take out these items, and then let them be crushed by the world suppression cauldron. This person had been dealing with Long Chen for so long, and he still had these 4 treasures on him. Even if this person was a monk, he was definitely a rich monk. After putting away the 4 magic weapons, Long Chen's right hand kept slapping down in the air. The Tao pattern flowed, and the world suppression cauldron's shadow above became more relaxed. Then, a fingernail-sized fragment of the world suppression cauldron floated into Long Chen's hand. This scene was witnessed by the immeasurable monarch, whose entire body was charred black. His eyes were wide open. He did not care about the world suppression cauldron's shadow that had yet to disappear, and cried out, What is this? A fingernail-sized piece of metal can turn into a cauldron, and suppress me to this extent. Long Chen had no intention of answering this person. He just smiled and said, This array will last for 4 hours. I will leave first. Goodbye. After he finished speaking, Long Chen turned and left the courtyard, and disappeared into the night sky. Although the immeasurable immeasurable emperor, in his body, he did not have an immeasurable emperor, immeasurable of a mortal, and immeasurable emperor. This person was a mid-stage soul emperor. Long Chen's actions were enough for him to leave this place and prevent this person from chasing after him and causing unnecessary trouble. Long Chen concealed his cultivation and traveled far away from the city. However, he could still hear the discussions of the people on the streets. For immortal emperors fought for an entire day in the White Bone Forbidden area. Yes, 2 of them escaped from the White Bone Palace with only their divine souls, and the other 2 were still fighting after they left. The 4 immortal emperors seemed to be fighting each other because of a person called the Immeasurable Emperor. Why? You don't know, do you? I heard that the Immeasurable Emperor has a great treasure in his hand, and is proficient in the art of disguise. Because of this, the 2 immortal emperors fought with the people who were originally in the White Bone Forbidden area. Long Chen smiled bitterly when he heard this. Just as he thought, these 4 people were probably eyeing the White Bone Forbidden area. Once an immortal emperor appeared, they would attack. The 2 people who went in later must have thought that one of the 2 people was the Immeasurable Emperor, and the Immeasurable Emperor must have added fuel to the fire. This person became the leader of the Bone Snake mercenary group in order to see such a situation. If Long Chen did not have the Immortal Emperor's remnant soul to hide his cultivation, he would have been surrounded and attacked as the Immeasurable Emperor when he approached the White Bone Forbidden area. 2 hours later, Long Chen opened up a cave in a valley and stopped. He looked at the 2 pieces of black cloth in his hand, his heart surging, but he did not sigh. As strong as the Realm Master, his lifespan was counted in millions of years, but now, he only had a wisp of remnant soul and many broken bodies left. However, every time Long Chen asked the Immortal Emperor's remnant soul why he had fallen to such a state, he was unwilling to say anything. The 2 pieces of black cloth unfolded, revealing a thumb and a pinky. The moment the black cloth was unfolded, the 2 fingers immediately released an aura that caused the space to fluctuate, and the lines on the fingertips seemed to have Tao rhymes circulating, cycling back and forth. Where the finger was broken, the bones seemed to be born from chaos, flickering with a golden light that stung one's eyes. Even though it was a broken place, the bright red blood seemed to be the origin of heaven and earth, emitting an aura that made one's heart palpitate. The immortal emperor had been dead for so long, but his blood was still bright red, as if it had existed since time immemorial. Longchen could not help but gasp. He had only glanced at the Tao patterns on the fingertips, but he felt as if there was an ancient bell ringing in his mind, and it was like thunder roaring continuously. It was no wonder that the immeasurable emperor had said that just looking at the patterns on the fingertips would benefit him greatly. While Longchen was pondering, the immortal emperor's remnant soul said, "It's just 2 fingers, don't look at it anymore. Refine the origin out of it according to the method I taught you, and integrate it into your body." Longchen took a deep breath, and when he heard the words of the immortal emperor's remnant soul, he immediately calmed down. He looked at the void in front of him and bowed deeply, and said in a deep voice, "Master treated me so well, and was willing to give me his body. Longchen will never forget Master's will." Longchen's words came from the bottom of his heart. Although the immortal emperor's remnant soul was an obsession, and sometimes made Longchen feel uncomfortable, he would never forget this kindness. If it were not for the immortal emperor's remnant soul, he would not have had this opportunity. The immortal emperor's remnant soul was deep inside Longchen's soul, and inside the Dragon Palace. When he saw this, he could not help but be shocked, and his expression softened a little. However, in the next moment, he returned to normal and regained his solemn expression. He snorted coldly and said, "Don't be sentimental here. Since my soul is dead, what's the use of this body? I'll teach you the smelting method now." The intense brilliance directly imprinted on Longchen's soul, and it was like a branding iron carving. Rays of brilliance rained down like rain. A method of mental manipulation appeared in Longchen's mind out of nowhere, and this method was actually complementary to the Chaos Golden Code. "My body may be useful to others, but it's next to nothing. You were originally formed from my internal organs and blood, and you have the Chaos Golden Code. If you have 70 to 80% of my body, you can even directly replace the immortal emperor," the immortal emperor's remnant soul said. Longchen nodded, just as the immortal emperor's remnant soul said. When he came into contact with the immortal emperor's remnant body, he felt the blood in his body and even his soul begin to boil. This immortal emperor's remnant body was the greatest fortune in the world to him. The mental cultivation method was imprinted on his soul, and Longchen subconsciously circulated the Chaos Golden Code at the same time. Buzz. The mental cultivation method had just been circulated. Chapter 858. 100 meters below the valley, Longchen concealed his aura and smelted the Archlord's body. The 2 finger bones seemed to be connected to heaven and earth. Countless threads covered the entire cave abode. The threads came out from where the finger bones were broken and went into Longchen's right pinky and thumb. Longchen did not look like he was in pain. Instead, he looked extremely peaceful. He was sweating profusely. He felt that both his soul and body had reached an unprecedented level of strength. There seemed to be Tao rhymes and Tao laws in his eyes. The entire space became clear. "In just an hour, my cultivation has started to loosen." Longchen could not help but tremble. He felt like he was in a dream. He had just stepped into the Celestial Emperor realm a month ago. If an ordinary person cultivated normally, it would take years for him to reach the 2nd stage of the Celestial Emperor realm, even if he had countless treasures. After reaching the 3rd stage of the Celestial Emperor realm, he would encounter a barrier. It would not be surprising if his cultivation stagnated for decades or even centuries. But now, in less than an hour, he felt that his cultivation of the 1st level of the Imperial Emperor realm was beginning to loosen. If news of such a terrifying speed spread, it would cause an uproar in the entire ancient sacred divine world. He finally understood why the Archlord's remnant soul had said that this was the only way to become a celestial emperor within 100 years. On the other side, in the central courtyard of the Bone Snake mercenaries, the immeasurable emperor was almost blown into pieces. The Tao laws on the storage ring on his finger were intertwined with Tao laws. It actually blasted the illusory world-suppressing cauldron in the sky. Immeasurable. This fellow's formation has already been dispelled. I even used this Tao ring, but I was still trapped for a full 2 hours. As he spoke, the Tao laws on his right hand were continuously emitting Tao laws. They fell on his body like green rain. After the light dissipated, his body recovered to its original state in just a dozen breaths' time. Although the immeasurable emperor's body had recovered, his face was now as black as the bottom of a pot. He stared at the pile of Dharma artifact fragments on the ground. The corners of his eyes were slightly wet. My efforts for more than 10 years have been destroyed by this kid. I definitely can't let this matter rest. If I can snatch that small fragment from that fellow, it wouldn't be too much of a loss, as the immeasurable emperor muttered. His eyes were filled with conspiracy. When he mentioned the fragment of the world-suppressing cauldron, he couldn't help but giggle. Swish swish. After 2 or 3 breaths, his right index finger began to move in the air. Wherever his fingertips passed, a bird the size of a palm condensed from light appeared. Then, he laughed and said, "Kid, it's not so easy to take my things. If I don't kill you today, I won't believe in Buddhism anymore." After saying that, golden light swirled around the immeasurable emperor's body, and his appearance once again turned into the leader of the Bone Snake mercenary group, Shuiyicheng, as he walked out of the courtyard. An hour passed. A piece of news swept through the streets and alleys of the forbidden land of white bones. There were rumors among many mercenaries that the immeasurable emperor had fled to a mountain range outside of the forbidden bone grounds with his treasures. There were even people who picked up the broken pieces of magic tools that he had discarded. 5 phantoms flew, and their target was actually the mountain range where Longchen had hidden himself. In front of the 5 people, a golden silk bird beast flapped its wings and flew. These 5 people were all immortal emperors, but 2 of them only had their divine souls. These 2 divine souls each followed behind an immortal emperor, and their eyes were filled with hostility as they stared at the other 2. For fellow Taoists, this immeasurable emperor has many tricks up his sleeves, and he has many magic tools in his hands. Let's temporarily take him down, and then we'll divide it equally. The person who spoke walked at the front. He had a righteous expression, and his appearance was rather boorish. When the 4 of them heard the name of the immeasurable emperor, their faces immediately turned ashen. One of them, who only had a divine soul, shouted, "If I catch this person, I'll definitely skin him and break his bones, then slowly torture him to death. If it weren't for these 2 idiots blocking us, how could this immeasurable emperor escape? This debt will be settled sooner or later. Now that my second brother only has a divine soul, who can blame it on? If you want to compete, I'll accompany you at any time." Seeing the 4 of them like this, the leader controlled the golden silk bird and said with righteous indignation, "The immeasurable emperor really deserves to die." The magic tools in his hands were all dug out from the ancestral graves of my clan. If it weren't for the special secret imprint of my clan, we might not have been able to find his tracks today. He must have sensed something by now. Otherwise, others wouldn't have coincidentally found the magic tools he left behind. Everyone, let's put aside our grudges and find this person first. When the time comes, you can divide the things in his hands equally. I only want his life and the items that belong to my clan in the ancestral graves. The time is fleeting. When the 4 of them heard this, they snorted coldly and no longer had the intention to fight. Instead, they sped up. A middle-aged man stared at the boorish immortal emperor with a pitiful expression and said, "This immeasurable emperor is really a good-for-nothing." It's said that 90% of the things in his hands were obtained by digging people's graves. If he does too many things that damage his virtue, he'll die an unnatural death sooner or later. The boorish immortal emperor's eyes twitched. He agreed a few times and sped up. They were extremely fast. In less than 2 hours, they were already standing above a mountain range. Golden canary birds circled above the mountain range, but they didn't seem to know the exact location. The boorish immortal emperor frowned and stared at the mountain range below. The immeasurable emperor is in this mountain range, but he seems to have a special concealment technique. My secretary can't pinpoint his exact location. When the other four heard this, they snorted coldly. The white-haired old man said, "Since we're sure he's here, what are we waiting for? Destroy this entire mountain range for me." "That's right. When this place is razed to the ground, I don't believe that immoral bald donkey won't come out." Rumble. As soon as they finished speaking, they used all kinds of divine abilities to bombard the mountain range below. Multicolored light scattered in all directions, and countless terrifying auras instantly enveloped the entire mountain range. When the four immortal emperors attacked, the mountain range that spanned 100,000 miles began to shake and turn into powder at a speed visible to the naked eye. Countless origin beasts roared in fear. Some immortal emperors who were deep in the mountain range couldn't escape in time, and their souls were shattered into pieces. Several immortal emperors who were at the edge of the mountain range frantically fled in all directions, staring at the four immortal emperors in fear. But in the next moment, they were completely torn apart. One of the immortal emperors said coldly, "Kill all living things. Don't give this damn donkey a chance to escape." The mountain range shook violently, and the entire cave residence began to collapse. Long Chen's expression changed abruptly. He hurriedly put away the immortal emperor's corpse in front of him. Then he heard a thunderous roar. Chapter 859. Four of the 5 imperial emperors bombarded the ground crazily. The entire ground was collapsing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The rugged imperial emperor in the lead threw out a ring, which landed directly on the ground. The ring expanded in the wind and turned into nothingness as it shone brightly. Swoosh! Long Chen's figure suddenly rushed out of the valley and dodged the attacks of the 2 imperial emperors. "It's really you, immeasurable emperor. You're really hiding here. Take him down. I'll skin him alive today." Among the 5 imperial emperors, 2 of them shouted, their faces full of murderous intent. Long Chen looked over when he heard the voice. His expression immediately darkened. These 2 people were the ones he met in the Palace of Bones that day. However, one of them was only left with his divine soul. The other pair of people was similar to the 2 of them. Their eyes were full of anger. His eyes finally fell on the rugged imperial emperor in the lead. His face darkened and he snorted, "It's you again." The imperial emperor's remnant soul saw through the immeasurable emperor's disguise at a glance. Long Chen could not help but look at the Taoist ring that sealed the ground below. His face could not help but twitch. This guy still had a secret treasure in his hands. When the burly man saw Long Chen like this, he wailed loudly. Divine light surged from his body as he shouted angrily, "Immeasurable monarch, you dug up the burial ground of my clan's ancestors. Today, I will make you spit it all out." This guy's face was full of pain and regret, but also full of anger. If Long Chen did not know that he was the immeasurable emperor, he would have thought that he was an unfilial descendant who had dug up the grave of his ancestors. *CK your ancestors. Long Chen saw that the other 4 imperial emperors had taken the initiative to attack. He could not help but curse the immeasurable emperor and immediately counterattack. Rumble! For rays of divine light broke through the sky. The divine light turned into rainbows, like 4 stars falling from the sky. The 4 of them were ferocious and angry. They vented all the anger that they had accumulated because of the immeasurable emperor on Long Chen. Long Chen did not explain. He knew that no matter what he said now, these people would not believe him. Moreover, these people did not give him any chance to explain. Rumble! Rumble! 4 attacks landed at the same time. A ray of light appeared in front of Long Chen. His entire body was bathed in a golden ocean. Poochie! The glaring light collided, and Long Chen was blasted back nearly 10,000 meters. Blood kept flowing out of his mouth. The 4 imperial emperors were stunned, and then they shouted explosively, "Immeasurable imperial emperor, hurry up and use whatever ability you have. Do you really think that you can defeat the 5 of us with the strength of an early-stage imperial emperor?" Boundless Sovereign Emperor, What other tricks do you have up your sleeves? Rumor has it that you possess countless treasures. Even a late-stage sovereign emperor would find it difficult to take you down. The few of them spoke one after another. The immeasurable emperor was speechless. He shouted, "Don't give him a chance. Just kill him." After saying that, he took the lead and charged at Long Chen. Long Chen looked at the fragment of the world suppression cauldron at his fingertips and was secretly shocked. Although he had merged with a small amount of the Imperial Emperor's body, he had only reached the late stage of the first stage of the Imperial Emperor realm. But even so, he had actually activated part of the Tao inscriptions in the fragment of the world suppression cauldron without using a formation. Otherwise, with his current strength, he would not have been able to barely block the attack of 4 mid-stage Imperial Emperors. It has only been 4 to 6 hours, and my strength has changed so much, thoughts ran through Long Chen's mind. When he saw the immeasurable emperor rushing over anxiously, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. With a thought, he held a feather in his hand. The feather was like glass. The 3 colors of divine light on it alternated. It was extremely light in his hand. However, at a glance, it made people feel as if a wild bird beast was roaring and charging out. It's not that he left an imprint on these Dharma artifacts. It's that golden bird in front of him. If I'm not wrong, this fellow has imprinted the formation inscriptions on the 4 Dharma artifacts in your hand into his mind. Carve the specific Tao inscriptions into this golden bird. Then, this bird will be able to track you. The Imperial Emperor's remnant soul said calmly. Long Chen nodded. In his heart, he wasn't prepared to throw away these 4 items. According to the Imperial Emperor's remnant soul, the only way to erase this connection was to destroy these 4 items. However, he had not reached that step yet. Long Chen had already noticed the immeasurable emperor's expression. It was as if his wife, whom he had protected in every way, had been taken by someone else on their wedding night. The 5 Imperial Emperors were about to attack again in the blink of an eye. With their unparalleled mid-stage Imperial Emperor combat strength, even Long Chen's heaven-defying talent would not be able to bear the consequences after a few rounds. Among the 5 of them, the one with the lowest cultivation level was 4 levels higher than him. Without the Imperial Emperor's remnant soul's guidance, the world suppression cauldron could not mobilize all of its power. It could not suppress the Imperial Emperors like before. Rise! Under the watchful eyes of the 5 people, the divine light in Long Chen's hand continuously surged into the tricolored feather. F***ck your grandmother, a bunch of idiots! The immeasurable emperor roared. Instead of advancing, he retreated. On the other hand, the other 4 people looked confused. Not only did they not retreat, but they also took out their Dharma artifacts and attacked Long Chen. The 4 Dharma artifacts' power shook the sky. However, after being swept by the feather, they lost all their luster and fell to the ground. At the same time, the feather shattered into pieces and turned into tricolored brilliance that filled the sky. It was like stars falling around Long Chen. Long Chen's eyes were filled with shock. He felt as if his entire body had merged with the sky. Buzz! The tricolored brilliance flashed. In the blink of an eye, Long Chen was already tens of thousands of meters away. The 4 Imperial Emperors looked at the ordinary metal on the ground. They were stunned, and their faces were filled with disbelief. One of them stared at Long Chen's back in the tricolored divine feather. He muttered, "This belongs to the Star Feather Divine Clan." Rumor has it that the immeasurable emperor was hunted down by the Star Feather Divine Clan for 10 years because of this item. You're saying that this item was dug out from the tomb of the previous head of the Star Feather Divine Clan? That Earth Origin Divine Clan? It's said that this item was refined by the previous head of the clan. While the few of them were shocked, the immeasurable emperor was fuming with anger. He had kept the tricolored divine feather for so long, but now it was being used by someone else. This item was not as simple as increasing one's speed. It could also temporarily break the Tao patterns on Dharma artifacts. It was the nemesis of most Dharma artifacts. This item was simply magical to the immeasurable emperor. He had been looking for an opportunity to obtain a large number of Dharma artifacts in one go. Now, Longchen had only swept away 3 Dharma artifacts. This was simply a waste of God's gift. No, I must take him down. The immeasurable emperor was stunned. His eyes were bloodshot. He grabbed the air with his right hand. The Tao ring rose into the air and turned into a long boat. Chapter 860. While the 4 emperors were still in shock, the immeasurable emperor, who had transformed into a burly man, was already standing on the longboat. The black hair on his right hand turned into sparks that fell under his feet. What are you waiting for? If you don't chase after him, he'll escape. The immeasurable emperor shouted. My Taoist artifact was specially given to me by my clan to chase after this person. Don't be careless. The 4 imperial emperors were stunned. They hurriedly leaped onto the longboat. The leader was very puzzled. You said that your longboat can catch up to such a... Before he could finish his sentence, the longboat had already soared into the sky, and divine flames were surging in all directions. In just a breath's time, it actually flew straight toward Longchen. Longchen's face was extremely gloomy as they chased after each other. Even the 4 emperors behind him did not seem to have expected that the burly man in front of them would have such a strange ring on his hand. The 4 of them were even prepared to kill the immeasurable emperor at the same time, and the next target would be this burly man. This chase lasted for a full day and night. Longchen could not shake them off at all. Most importantly, they did not seem to have any intention of slowing down at all. Instead, the tricolor light feathers on his body gradually began to dissipate. How many strange artifacts does this immeasurable emperor have on him? Longchen's gaze swept across the burly man, and he was also furious. Now, it seemed that he had been deceived by this fellow that day. This fellow might only have these 4 artifacts in his storage ring, but if even the storage ring on his finger was a strange treasure, then he probably had many more on him. There's no other way. I can only go to that place again. Longchen fiercely gritted his teeth, and his figure turned and sped away. The 5 of them still followed closely behind. A day passed in the blink of an eye. The leader's expression changed drastically, and he said, "This immeasurable emperor is planning to enter the forbidden white bone grounds again. We must stop him." The few of them could tell at a glance that Longchen's destination was the forbidden white bone grounds. A hint of hesitation appeared on the face of the burly man that the immeasurable emperor had transformed into. His eyes were unprecedentedly serious, and there was even a hint of fear in them. The longboat under his feet gradually slowed down. Seeing this, the other 4 frowned. 2 of them even shouted, "What are you doing? Why aren't you speeding up and stopping him? Even if we can't stop him, we can't just give up like this. At most, we'll just charge in and try. Even if this person is familiar with this place, he still has to be wary. We might still have a chance." When the immeasurable monarch saw the tricolored feathers around Longchen's body, he felt a sharp pain in his heart. He shouted coldly, "Then let's go." The 5 of them followed closely behind Longchen and rushed into the white bone forbidden zone. Crack, crack, crack. Longchen fell straight into the outskirts of the white bone forbidden zone, and his speed also decreased a little. He had just charged out 1,000 meters when he heard a series of crisp sounds behind him. Immediately, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. The immeasurable monarch had no one following closely behind him, so he had no choice but to venture deep into the white bone forbidden zone. "Stop!" The immeasurable emperor suddenly shouted, and his body stiffened. The other 5 didn't know what was going on, and they stared at him in confusion. The cold-looking middle-aged man snorted, "Let's hurry up and rush over. We've all been here with that mercenary before. With our cultivation, we don't need to fear these creatures. All of you, shut up." The immeasurable emperor suddenly shouted, and didn't say another word. The cold-looking middle-aged man and the old man beside him, who was only left with a divine soul, were stunned. Then, they flew into a rage and said coldly, "You're courting death." Crack, crack, crack. A group of white skeletons, like solemn infantry, neatly walked past where Long Chen had just passed. The shouts of the middle-aged man and the old man seemed to have angered them. The entire group of white skeletons turned into white smoke, and in the next moment, they appeared on their shoulders. Crack, crack, crack. Then, there was a bone-chilling sound of flesh and bone shattering. The two emperors were as weak as ordinary people. They screamed miserably as they were torn to pieces. Even their divine souls were swallowed by the white skeletons. The immeasurable emperor, who had transformed into a burly man, was dripping with blood. Flesh and blood splattered on his face. His eyes were unprecedentedly cold and disgusted. But no matter what, he didn't make any sound. He didn't even blink. The other two emperors' pupils shrank, and they instantly sucked in a breath of cold air. They stood still and didn't move at all. The two emperors in front of them had been torn to pieces. Even emperors could regrow their limbs. As long as there was a part of their body left, they could regrow all their limbs. But now, they were torn to pieces like ordinary people. This strange scene and the rows of white bones made them break out in a cold sweat. They were able to achieve what they had today, and they weren't ordinary people. With just a thought, they knew that if they moved now, they would definitely die. After the two were completely torn to pieces, the soldiers on the longboat lined up neatly again and walked forward. The path of white bones, no living person should enter. This was an ironclad rule that every surviving mercenary knew. The white bones disappeared. Other than the immeasurable emperor, the other emperor and the divine soul of the other emperor were completely frozen in place. They didn't move for a long time. Last time, they directly rushed to the front of the White Bone Palace. This time, they almost died outside the Forbidden Bone Palace. The two of them looked at the flesh and blood on the ground, and their right hands couldn't help but tremble. The two dead emperors seemed to have been sucked dry. Not a trace of divine power was left. Let's go. Since we've already chased here, there's no reason to turn back. Just as the two of them were hesitating, the immeasurable emperor took the initiative to speak. There seemed to be a special meaning in his eyes. Before the two of them could answer, the longboat shot out and rushed toward the White Bone Palace in the second area of the Forbidden Bone Palace. On the other side, Long Chen went deep into the White Bone Palace again. This group of white bone soldiers had really bought him a lot of time. He casually chose a long corridor and went deep into it. The shape of this long corridor had changed greatly from the last time he came here. This White Bone Palace is strange. It's just one place, but there are many corridors. And there are many changes every day. Once you walk out and enter again, you'll be in a different place. This was Long Chen's second time here, and he was a little more curious about this place. Boom, crack, crack. Long Chen easily walked through the first corridor. Just as he was about to step into the second corridor, his expression changed greatly. At the end of the second corridor, there was a bright flower of blood blooming at the corner of the wall. If you see a flower of blood in the White Bone Palace, it means that a bloody bone general has been born. This was what the burly man in the mercenary group warned again and again. Chapter 861. Blood blossomed. Long Chen turned and was about to leave for another corridor. There was a rumor in the mercenary group that white bone blood generals would only appear after the sixth corridor. Anyone who encountered them would have a slim chance of survival. Although blood generals were a type of bone generals, their combat power far exceeded that of bone generals. In the past, there were emperors who came to the forbidden land of White Bone and went to the White Bone Palace. Some emperors died in the hands of blood generals. Of course. The other part died in the White Bone Abyss. Long Chen had been in the mercenary group for a long time, but he was very wary of the White Bone Abyss. Otherwise, he wouldn't have left directly after seeing through the immeasurable monarch's trick the first time he came here. Forbidden Land of White Bone. There were not many emperors here. Even if there were people who needed bone medicine, they were mostly handled by the mercenaries. Most of the reason was because of blood generals. Once touched, even an emperor's death rate was extremely high. As for the white bone abyss, there were not many emperors who died. It was rumored that there were only 2 or 3, and one even ran out. However, the emperor who ran out turned into a lunatic. This person consumed his own flesh and blood every day. After 3 years, his origin was extinguished and he died. When he died, he knelt outside the forbidden land of White Bone. Since then, no one dared to step into the White Bone abyss. These rumors from the mercenary group kept echoing in Long Chen's ears. He quickened his steps and felt a chill down his spine. Buzz! Long Chen had just turned around for 2 breaths when he saw bloody hands reaching out from the white bone walls on both sides of the corridor. These bloody hands were densely packed and grabbed at Long Chen. Every one of them was extremely twisted. Long Chen felt his scalp go numb. Even though his heart was as strong as iron, he could not help but feel a chill. Azura whirling elephant. Long Chen roared. The Azura shadow in his heart roared and a totem suddenly enveloped Long Chen. Rumble. Once the totem appeared, a third of the chains on his body had been released. The Azura seemed to have come to life. It was ferocious and terrifying, and as it roared, blood energy surged. Whoosh! With a swing of the chain, the Azura chi dispersed in all directions. The withered arms that stretched out from both sides of the corridor emitted black smoke as they were incinerated. Blood prison. As the Azura totem roared, the blood general behind Long Chen spoke human language and roared. The entire second corridor began to turn blood red at a speed visible to the naked eye. Whether it was the ground or the walls, the originally pale bones were all bleeding blood. Buzz! Long Chen's feet suddenly stopped in place. He had originally wanted to escape, but now he was bound. This kind of restriction was extremely strange. As long as Long Chen thought about leaving this place, he would feel as if the entire world was crashing down on him. It was as if no one was allowed to leave this blood-red corridor. We can't leave. This blood general used the blood he sacrificed to seal the Tao law of this place. Unless we kill him, we can't leave. The Sovereign Lord's remnant soul sent a telepathic message to Long Chen's divine soul. Long Chen turned around and stared at the blood general with a grave expression. The blood general was very similar to the bone general. They were both made of white bones, but there was a thick blood energy around him. Under this blood energy, Long Chen could even faintly see the blood vessels pulsing. Long Chen took a deep breath. Just by looking at the flickering light in the blood general's eyes, he knew that this thing was extremely difficult to deal with. The blood general saw Long Chen turn his head. His eyes were instantly filled with ferocity, no different from an ordinary person's. Human, offer your blood. The blood general held a half-meter short blade in each hand. The short blades were slightly different from ordinary bone blades. They were not completely white, but were shrouded in a faint layer of blood mist. When the blood general finished speaking, he did not use any magical battle technique, but charged at Long Chen. Long Chen's brows were tightly furrowed. Divine light poured out of his body like a tide, and the power of his battle technique was madly activated. Boom boom boom. The enormous sound passed. Long Chen looked over, and his expression changed dramatically. When the light dissipated, the blood general actually took his attack head-on and charged towards him. The 2 long sabers slashed down, as if they were generals who had gone through hundreds of battles on the battlefield. Long Chen did not have a long weapon, and the blood-colored short blade directly cut across his right hand. Crack! The sound of flesh being torn apart entered Long Chen's ears. His right palm was cut by a long and thin knife wound. The wound was deep enough to see bone, but it was not a serious injury. What shocked Long Chen was that the wound could not heal on its own, as though he only had a mortal body. Human, such a hard hand. The blood vessels at the corner of the blood general's mouth twitched as though he was grinning. Long Chen snorted coldly. He knew that the blood general was talking about his right thumb and little finger. If not for these 2 fingers, his right hand would have been cut off along with the bones. At this moment, Long Chen was cursing the immeasurable monarch again. If he did not lead this group of people to chase and give Long Chen enough time to absorb the power of the Emperor's remnant body, his thumb and little finger would have been able to block this strange weapon. Grab the blade, or with your current strength, you will be at a disadvantage against this strange white bone creature, the Emperor's remnant soul instructed. Long Chen nodded, and his heart became more and more serious. Since the Emperor's remnant soul instructed him, it meant that this white bone creature already had the ability to take his life. On the other side, the golden silk bird beast in the palace of white bones was directly crushed into powder, and could not continue to track Long Chen. The immeasurable Emperor and the remaining two Emperors who had already entered the corridor heard the rumbling sounds, and immediately rushed back the way they came, heading straight for the corridor where Long Chen was. Ever since the immeasurable Emperor entered the forbidden white bones zone, his entire face had not shown any expression. The two Emperors did not care. After seeing the terrifying scene of the white bone corridor, they felt their scalps tingle when they arrived at the palace of white bones. If he rushes past the sixth corridor, we will give up chasing him. It's a deal. I've heard that once he passes the sixth corridor, even an emperor may die. It's really not worth the risk. The immeasurable Emperor sneered in his heart. The two of them had vowed solemnly before, but now, they were frightened to such an extent after seeing the bone soldiers passing through the path. Don't worry, fellow Taoists. I specially investigated in the mercenary group before coming. The immeasurable Emperor pretended to be calm. After the sixth corridor, as long as we don't encounter a blood general, it won't be a problem to reach the ninth corridor. Just as the immeasurable Emperor was thinking of ways to persuade the two, he saw them stop at the end of the first corridor. The immeasurable Emperor is in the second corridor. Why did you two stop? I already said that as long as you don't encounter a blood general after the sixth corridor. He explained as he rushed in front of the two. When he saw Long Chen and a blood general fighting, he was completely stunned. Chapter 862. The immeasurable Emperor stared blankly at the blood-red corridor. He could not believe that the thing that appeared in the second corridor was a blood general. The immeasurable Emperor seems to be suppressed by the bone general. The heavens are helping me. The leader of the monarchs sneered. On the other hand, the immeasurable Emperor, who was disguised as a burly man, had a grave expression. Long Chen was in the corridor, with no less than 7 or 8 knife wounds all over his body. The wounds were dripping with blood and showed no signs of healing. It was very strange. The two monarchs did not dare to act rashly after the previous lesson, but Peerless Emperor looked like he was watching a good show. Long Chen's expression darkened completely. He had shaken them off, but because of the blood general, he was once again attacked from both sides. The more they looked, the more shocked they were. Even though they were monarchs, they were inexplicably afraid of the blood general. And monarch was completely suppressed by the blood general. Boom, crack, crack. While they were shocked, they saw Long Chen take the blood general's knife head-on. The knife chopped directly below his shoulder blade. At the same time, he punched out with his right hand and forced the blood general to retreat. The knife on the blood general's shoulder blade was snatched away by Long Chen, but Long Chen's shoulder could not stop bleeding. The blood qi in the surroundings grew thicker. But at this moment, a wisp of yellow light appeared in Long Chen's hand. It was a yellow jade rui. Although there were 3 cracks on the rui, there were still Taoist rhythms flowing. Buzz! With a wave of the rui, even the blood qi around the blood general was forced to retreat. Whoosh! Long Chen cut off the blood general's head in one stroke. At the same time, the blood in the corridor receded like a tide. Long Chen was panting heavily. He didn't even turn his head as he rushed toward the third corridor. The rui in his hand floated directly in the middle of the second corridor, as if it was suppressing the place. Seeing this, the immeasurable Emperor's eyes widened and his aura became chaotic. Topaz Rui. This was also one of the 4 items that Long Chen had taken away from him. He watched as Longchen took out his belongings one by one and used them. He felt as if his heart was bleeding. After him! We must take him down today. The immeasurable emperor was the first to rush out. The light emitted by the scepter blocked their path, but it only lasted for a few dozen breaths. The immeasurable monarch activated the Tao inscriptions and kept the item in his hand. When the other two emperors saw this scene, although they didn't express it, the immeasurable emperor knew in his heart. Whether or not these two could catch up to Longchen, their next target would most likely be him. The reason why no one had made a move yet was because they felt that he understood the forbidden land of white bones quite well. They continued to pursue Longchen. This time, there weren't any blood generals that shouldn't have appeared. After turning around a few times, they directly arrived at the 9th corridor. The immeasurable emperor saw Longchen standing at the end of the 9th corridor and frowned. You should know that once you step into the 9th corridor, you might enter the White Bones Abyss. The blood generals in the White Bones Abyss just now are only the beginning. Longchen turned around. Just as the immeasurable emperor said, he was a little afraid of the things that existed in the White Bones Abyss. He even guessed that there really was a White Bones King below. But now, how could these three people not force him into a desperate situation? If you have the guts, come at me. Longchen took a deep breath and directly rushed out of the 9th corridor. After the 9th corridor, any corridor could directly fall into the White Bones Abyss. The White Bones Abyss was enough to make emperors who knew about it change their expressions. Longchen jumped down without hesitation. On the contrary, it made the three emperors, including the immeasurable emperor who was disguised as a burly man, hesitate. The two of us don't plan to chase after you. The two emperors turned around and said to the immeasurable emperor. As they finished speaking, a murderous intent gradually flashed in their eyes. The other emperor, who only had a divine soul, said coldly, "The ring in your hand and the jade scepter in your hand are quite good. Why don't you give them to us as a gift to make friends?" The meaning of their words couldn't be more obvious. The immeasurable emperor, who had transformed into a burly man, stared at the two of them and snorted. "The two of you are really greedy, but also extremely stupid. Since you've come all the way here, then follow this poor monk for a walk." As the immeasurable emperor's voice fell, the disguise on his body gradually disappeared and he turned into a monk. The two emperors were stunned at first, then they became furious and immediately shouted, "So you're the immeasurable emperor? How dare you trick us? You're courting death." Just as the two of them were about to attack, the immeasurable emperor suddenly clapped his right hand in the air, and streaks of black light appeared in all directions. The black light covered the entire corridor at a speed visible to the naked eye. Longchen was very helpless at this moment, and his face was full of a bitter smile. This was because when he stepped into the 10th corridor, it was as if he lost his footing and fell into an abyss. His whole body kept falling down. Below him was most likely the legendary White Bone Abyss. As Longchen fell, he felt that his surroundings suddenly became darker, and a strange aura attacked him like a tide. Longchen's pupils suddenly shrank. He was very familiar with this feeling. This was the aura of the night attack in the White Bone Abyss. How can this be? It's clearly still daytime now. Why is there such a strange aura appearing? Longchen was very puzzled. Along with his doubts, there was even more anxiety in his heart. After the attack of the darkness, even bone soldiers could turn into bone generals or even bone commanders. If he could not find the protection of the White Bone God statue, his current situation would only become more and more dangerous. This time, I've really outsmarted myself. Longchen shook his head and sighed. He originally only wanted to hide temporarily after entering the 10th corridor and see if the other three would retreat. However, he never thought that his luck would be so bad. Longchen was still falling, and this abyss was really bottomless. The strange aura wrapped around Longchen's body, and he could not see his own fingers in all directions. Even if he spread out his divine sense, he could not move more than a few meters around him. Only the Emperor's remnant soul could see a thing or two. "There's still someone above you." the Emperor's remnant soul reminded him. Longchen looked up and saw that the immeasurable Emperor had returned to his original body and was actually following closely behind him. Not far from him, there were two other Emperors. Chapter 863. At this moment, the immeasurable Emperor had already returned to his original appearance. He was standing on two white bone statues. As he spoke, he put his palms together in a compassionate and holy manner. If Longchen did not know that this person was the immeasurable Emperor, he might have really thought that this person was a senior monk who bemoaned the state of the universe and pitied the fate of mankind. Thank you for your kindness, senior monk. My life is still fine. I don't need you to save me. Longchen coldly snorted. The immeasurable Emperor was standing on the statue. With a wave of his hands, a white light appeared. Only now did Longchen realize that these two monarchs had actually been restrained by the immeasurable Emperor. The light that restrained the two was actually the light from the statue beneath his feet. Longchen suddenly remembered the evaluation that everyone had of the immeasurable Emperor. When everyone thought that the immeasurable Emperor was definitely hiding in the White Bone Forbidden Area, there were people who said that he was extremely familiar with the White Bone Forbidden Area. This was also one of the reasons why Longchen was mistaken for the immeasurable Emperor when he was carrying the white bone statue on his back. Now, it seemed that this was true. Back then, Longchen had only been able to carry the statue with the primal chaos golden tome. This immeasurable Emperor was leisurely walking on the statue. The two of them continued to descend into the abyss, but their states were completely different. Longchen seemed to be pulled by some kind of power, while the immeasurable Emperor was standing on the statue and was descending on his own. The White Bone Abyss. It was the most dangerous place in the White Bone Forbidden Area. Any monarch who knew about it would turn pale at the mention of it. Rumble. Longchen landed heavily on the ground. The huge impact caused waves of air to rise from the ground. The waves of air swept out. It was a white wave that filled the sky. If one looked carefully, they would realize that this white wave was formed from bone powder. The moment Longchen landed on the ground, he shot up and looked around cautiously. Although it was dark, it was not as if he could not see anything. In all directions, there were mountains of white bones. Even the ground was covered in endless white bones. As soon as Longchen landed, the immeasurable Emperor slowly descended from above. He had no intention of landing on the ground of bones. He stared at Longchen and the two monarchs who were bound by the white light. He said indifferently, "Although the two of you don't know much about the White Bone Forbidden region, you should know what the outcome is after entering the White Bone Abyss. Help me take down Longchen, and I'll send you out today. Otherwise, you can only wait for death here." The two imperial emperors' faces turned ashen when they saw the white light around them dissipating rapidly. Instead of rushing toward Longchen, the two of them rushed toward the immeasurable Emperor. Their attacks were terrifying, and they were clearly unable to restrain their fury. However, the two had only moved a few meters when the immeasurable Emperor disappeared from where he stood. When he reappeared, he was dozens of meters in the air. When the two of them were about to chase after him, they realized that they couldn't leave the ground at all. A huge and strange black aura enveloped the darkness and pressed them to the ground. The immeasurable Emperor seemed to have known this would happen. He smiled and said, "Benefactors, please listen to this poor monk. Otherwise, you'll become one of these white bones." Although he said so. However, the immeasurable Emperor seemed to be afraid of the endless white bones below. He had no intention of descending from the ground. Just as the two of them were hesitating, Longchen stepped forward and said, "The two of you have been chasing after me all this time. It was this person who instigated it. This old bald donkey is full of lies. The two of you still want to believe him? Why don't we join hands and take him down?" Longchen's words startled the two of them. However, they immediately shook their heads. The meaning of his words was self-evident. Just as Longchen said, the two of them hated the immeasurable Emperor to the core. However, the immeasurable Emperor was now standing 100 or 200 meters above them. The smile on the immeasurable emperor's face grew wider. It seemed that Long Chen's current appearance made him feel relieved. Rumble. However, in the next moment, a white bone blade suddenly appeared and smashed the two statues under his feet into pieces. The immeasurable emperor's expression changed greatly. He roared, "What tricks do you have? When did you send this blade to me from the ground?" The immeasurable emperor wished he could slap himself to death. This was the second time he had been taken advantage of by Long Chen. The first time, he was unknowingly trapped by Long Chen's formation and almost destroyed 80% of his magic tool. This time, Long Chen once again sent a bone blade to his feet silently. The immeasurable emperor was puzzled by this method of concealing the aura of his divine sense. If this bone blade was in the outside world, even if it slashed at him, he would be able to dodge it in an instant. However, he was currently standing on the statues, so his movements were restricted. Moreover, the bone blade's target was not him, but the two statues under his feet. The moment the bone blade touched the statues, it exploded. Shockingly, it contained a lot of divine power. The two statues were crushed by the divine power and turned into stone fragments that filled the sky. After the immeasurable emperor recovered from his shock, his entire face darkened. There was a hint of fear in his eyes. "Immeasurable, you've killed me." Long Chen sneered and said, "We're all standing on the ground. It's really unfair that you're the only one in the air. Our situation has something to do with you. It's hard to say who's the one harming who." The immeasurable emperor landed on the ground as expected. However, for some reason, white smoke was rising from the white bones half a meter below his feet. "You've killed me. You've killed me." The immeasurable emperor looked at the white bones below his feet and muttered. At the same time, apart from Long Chen, the other two celestial emperors did not care so much. They directly charged at the immeasurable emperor. The two of them were mid-stage celestial emperors. Although one of them was only left with his soul, it was impossible for them to kill someone of the same level as them. Moreover, they were in the white bone abyss. "Hand over the treasures and all the artifacts on you. Kneel down and beg for mercy." The leader of the celestial emperors was infuriated. A ray of divine light shot into the sky. Although the other person was only left with his soul, wind and lightning intersected when he moved. Divine light filled the sky. When the immeasurable emperor saw this, he frantically retreated. At the same time, the Tao ring on his right hand expanded and blocked one of them. The Tao ring underwent a myriad of transformations, and the golden light on it shot out in all directions like a rainbow. The celestial emperor, who was only left with his soul, rushed into the range of the Tao ring. He was instantly blocked by the Tao ring. Then, a golden light covered dozens of meters around him. The item turned into a huge bowl and directly covered him on the ground. On the other side, Long Chen watched the three of them fight. His brows furrowed more and more. He clearly saw that although the three people's divine lights were powerful, they disappeared without a trace when they landed on the white bones. Chapter 864. The immeasurable emperor didn't seem to want to fight this person head-on. He even used a willow branch as a substitute to save his divine power. The monarch chasing him turned around and glanced at Long Chen from afar. Long Chen didn't say anything. He just shrugged. "You damn bald donkey, you're about to die and you're still trying to trick me." The monarch madly chased after the immeasurable emperor. He didn't believe anything he said. As the two of them chased after each other, Long Chen silently walked around as far as his eyes could see. There were 4 people in the abyss. One of them was trapped by the golden bowl formed by the Tao ring. Another was walking slowly on the white bones, as if he was looking for something. The other 2 were chasing after each other. One of them was attacking with all his might, while the other was dodging everywhere. He constantly used his magic tool to block the attacks. He had no intention of fighting back. This strange scene lasted for more than 2 hours. The person chasing after immeasurable monarch finally couldn't help but stop. Immeasurable monarch even turned around and said while panting, "Stop chasing me. If you continue chasing me like this, we will all die if something happens." The monarch coldly snorted. He already felt that something was wrong. He could already feel the divine power in his body rapidly drying up. In the past 2 hours, he didn't feel his body absorbing any divine power at all. "What else do you know? How can we leave this damned place?" the monarch asked the immeasurable emperor. The immeasurable emperor acted out of character. He gravely said, "If I hadn't attracted so many black tides in advance, this place wouldn't be so peaceful. Go and find those two. If the 4 of us work together, we might have a chance of leaving this place." After the immeasurable emperor finished speaking, he waved his right hand and took back the Tao ring in the distance. The monarch who only had his soul left was furious. He roared and charged at the immeasurable emperor again. However, this time, the other monarch stopped him. He said in a low voice, "This place is too strange. Let's leave this place first." Longchen also stopped in his tracks. He seemed to have noticed them, and with a few movements, he was dozens of meters away from them. Longchen stared at the immeasurable emperor and said calmly, "It's better for a monk like you to swear an oath to the undying Tao law. Otherwise, I think the 3 of us should join forces and kill you." The other 2 celestial emperors looked at each other and nodded. Then, they stared at the immeasurable emperor. The immeasurable emperor coldly snorted and said, "You're really measuring the father of a gentleman with the heart of a villain. I'm a monk, and monks don't hit people. What are the 2 of you waiting for?" Before he could finish his sentence, Longchen had already rushed over. "I, the immeasurable emperor, swear in the name of the ancient saint divine world and the ancient saint world's world lord that I will not lie to the 4 of you." The immeasurable emperor smiled awkwardly when he saw the looks on the faces of the 3 of them. He put his palms together and hurriedly bowed. "Amitabha. Benefactors, please don't be so murderous. I'm just joking with you." The 3 of them stared at the immeasurable emperor, and their teeth were itching. Longchen was the same. If he had not sworn not to take this person's life, even if this person really knew something, Longchen would have thought of a way to inscribe a formation to suppress him. If it were not for this person, Longchen would not have ended up in such a state. Longchen said in a low voice, "Hurry up and tell us what you know. Don't waste our time here." The immeasurable emperor also hated Longchen so much that his teeth were itching. He had always loved treasures. Longchen had destroyed 80 to 90% of his artifacts in one go, and he had even taken away 4 of his treasures. If it were not for the fact that he could not take this lying down, he would not have chased him to this place. Most importantly, Longchen had even shattered the 2 statues under his feet. This was simply asking for his life. The immeasurable emperor glared fiercely at Longchen and said solemnly, "You haven't noticed yet, right? This place is gradually shrinking as far as your eyes can see. Soon, it will completely become the white bone abyss. If it weren't for the fact that we were in the 9th corridor just now and I directly turned this place into a scene that only appears when night falls, I'm afraid we wouldn't be so safe right now." Longchen and the other 2 people frowned. Even though the immeasurable emperor was full of lies, since he had already sworn to the undying Tao law, they naturally would not doubt him. The emperor in the lead asked in a low voice, "Why do you know so much about this place? The other emperors and I have heard that you have a deep understanding of the forbidden land of white bone. Once you enter this place, you will be like a fish in water." This emperor had been with 3 other people, but when they saw the immeasurable emperor step into the forbidden land of white bone and disappear, they immediately chose to leave. The 3 of them were quite familiar with the immeasurable emperor, and their original encampment was not far from the immeasurable emperor. The immeasurable emperor took a deep breath and said, "The people who came with you did not tell you that I don't only know about the forbidden land of white bone. I also know about the demon death acupoint, the blood cavern." The immeasurable emperor casually said a few things, but did not intend to continue explaining. At this moment, Longchen already understood. The reason this person had been hiding in the forbidden land of white bone was not just to make the other emperors his scapegoat. If Long Chen's guess was correct, this person was the descendant of the Immortal Buddha clan that the Emperor's remnant soul had mentioned. The Immortal Buddha clan's mission was to suppress evil spirits and bring benefits to the common people. This forbidden land of white bone was one of the places they suppressed. Long Chen even guessed that the other dangerous places that the immeasurable Emperor had mentioned were also places to suppress evil spirits. Rumble. While everyone was talking, the air in all directions suddenly began to boil like boiling water. Boom, boom, crack. After a violent boom, countless white bones on the ground began to tremble. These white bones had been here for an unknown number of years, and after a series of tremors, countless white bones turned into powder and flew into the air. The scene was extremely strange, as if they were in a fog. Remember my words. No matter what you hear from now on, do not believe it, and do not use your divine power. Just walk forward. Whether or not you can survive will depend on your luck. The immeasurable Emperor's face was covered in cold sweat, and his body was trembling slightly. Everyone did not have time to ask any questions, but they saw that the darkness had already eroded over from all directions. As far as their eyes could see, the visibility was less than 20 meters. Amateus Buddha, let this poor monk be lucky again today. As the immeasurable Emperor's voice fell, he actually closed his eyes. Long Chen looked at this person deeply. When he saw that all directions had fallen into darkness, he jumped directly behind the immeasurable Emperor. Darkness. Complete and utter darkness. This scene reminded Long Chen of the scene in the 10 Directions celestial domain where he had comprehended the law of nothingness with Yi Hailan and the Divine Mountain's secret realm. Endless loneliness, endless nothingness. Woo, woo, woo. A violent wind suddenly blew, and waves of ghostly cries and whimpers entered Long Chen's ears. He remembered the immeasurable Emperor's words and immediately closed his eyes, moving his feet forward. Even though there was only darkness in front of him, he did not stop for a moment. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.